the technical difficulties. The elite technocracy is trying to cut off our communication circuits, but we're not going to let them.
Technocrats at it again.
Welcome back to the Legacy YouTube channel. If this is your first time, welcome. This is the planetary headquarters for all of your celestial information. We live stream every Sunday, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notifications button so you are up to date with all the celestial information. You do not want to be walking around with only Cardi B, only Ferraris, and only money and stocks in your mind. You need to know about the celestial events. So I'm glad you're tuning in. Welcome and welcome back. My name is Deadrick Baker, joined by my brother Magma Sloth, Tyler Barker, and Tate Chilla. We're here talking about some really gnarly stuff today. It pertains to current social issues, and it gives you a little background on how this crazy reality we call planet Earth came to be. So today's segment is actually brought to you and thought up by my brother Magma Sloth, Tyler. So he'll give you a little overview on what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to dump some information on you guys. I got an information overload for all of you. It's probably one of the most pertinent and relevant issues going on right now, and it's something that none of us are aware of. This one kind of lurked up on us. It's the issue of technocracy, technofeudalism, and transhumanism. We got a lot to cover, but stay with us because you're going to want to hear this.
So technofeudalism, technocracy. Yeah, you're dropping a lot of buzzwords right here. My Spotify just popped up for some weird reason. Yeah, it almost reminds me of what we're feeling today on planet Earth. It feels like something is missing. Something's missing spiritually. The color and the vibrance of life is absent, and one can only wonder why. A lot of people wake up every day thinking, wow, is this it? I just wake up, go to work, and come back. You know, it kind of feels a little hopeless and a little dystopian. And it can really get to people. But we're here to try to get you to remember that you're more than what you think you are. And we're in a small point in time that is on a big evolutionary path. This isn't the end. Evolution entails and implies that you have to go from the worst to get to the better. You have your environmental stimuli, that pressure, that pain stimulus it's an extremely good motivator, and it causes you to start to create things to alter your environment so that you can start to create that best mind, body, spirit, global infrastructure once we get to that point. But we're not going to be starting at that point. We have to evolve to that point. So yeah, it does look dystopian and it does look shitty around us, but it can get a lot better with your cooperation, with your help, with all of us banding together and only focusing on growing mind, body, spirit together and not focusing on our differences, on the different ways we look, the different ways we talk. We will eventually get there. And to not let certain people with certain resources, a small select people with a lot of resources, don't let them manipulate you. Because believe it or not, as much as you think you're grown and you're smart and all that stuff, you can be manipulated. And there are people with agendas that are willing to manipulate you for their own personal gain. So we're going to talk about that a little bit now. We're going to learn how to shift this energy from this materialistic, technocratic base to a more mind, body, spirit, growth, and development type of thinking. So let's see if we can dive into the nitty-gritty. If you want to tell the people what you're talking about, what your segment's going to be today, Taychilla, real quickly.
Yeah, so I introduced a book on last week's live stream called Chronicles from the Future, and it's this guy who fell asleep in the 1920s for a year because he had a medical condition, and he goes to the future in 3906. And what's interesting is that the reason this story is compelling is not because of the far out claims, it's actually because of the way he describes the future. And he has descriptions of the future which sort of answer the exact question we're talking about today, is this technocracy concept, and how do we lead society amid large capital interests of the elite who are also, smart, but have a specific worldview that is not based on a universal spiritual principles. How do we reconcile that with the rise of technology, AI, how to avoid the Orwellian futures, written about in like Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, all those, classic literature books which predict um, the worst technological futures, that we might live in. And yeah, so I think this book is a real good refresher because it really presents the missing link in these gaps of thought, which is the spirituality aspect that is necessary to avoid the dystopian futures amidst the rise of technology. So that'll be my segment, some cool time travel, probably the most compelling time travel case in my book, in my collection. So I hope you guys enjoy that segment.
Hell yeah.
Heck yeah. So let's
Well, it gets
dive
juicy.
into the woo. Let's dive into it. I'm probably gonna more focus on the background story and how this special sect of technocrats possibly came to be. We're gonna dive into some crazy lore, World War II lore, some Nazi lore. Everybody loves some Nazi lore. It's gonna have fun. We're gonna have fun. Before we dive into it, do want to help ask you guys to hit that like button so it helps get this video to the front page and everybody else can be privy to the information you guys are as well. So let's go into it. I'll share my screen. This is from a YouTuber, kind of controversial YouTuber. I guess he's kind of into that Atlantis theory. His name has been thrown around in the white supremacist community as the light skinned people were the ones who gave technology to the lesser men. And how there's like a lot of people who like think the Atlanteans created the pyramids in South America, therefore it takes away from the indigenous local people that they didn't build it themselves, that they were too dumb and they had to be taught it, that kind of stuff. So that angle for archaeology. But some of his videos are packed with information. I'm not advocating for him. I'm not really telling you to go to his channel or anything. The link won't be in the description, but you guys can find it for yourself if you want. There's some cool information right here. But
You know what?
because we're talking,
I feel like that's going to be the case for a lot of information we cover in this video.
yeah, oh yeah, for sure. But everybody likes the Indiana Jones. The Nazis were always, and it's true, they were on the hunt for a lot of occult things in a very organized way. So we can take the information that they learned and apply it however we want to. Obviously, we're anti-Nazi in this bitch, but there's such a fascinating chapter in history. It really is.
No doubt.
All right, let's dive into it. So before we dive into it, I guess just a little preface. I'm going to go real deep into kind of like breakaway civilization, Antarctica, what happened at the end of World War II, and some lesser known history, but that has factual credentials. It's backed up factually. It's just an alternate angle of how history went down. And I don't know, you guys put the points together, but supposedly World War II had a alternative ending that not many people are too aware of. So here's the beginning. And I think it'll tie perfectly into what we're going to talk about later.
All right.
So I'll share my screen with you guys. Turn it up for the people.
Oh yeah, I've seen some videos by this guy. It's real interesting stuff.
Ever since the early 20th century, Antarctica has been a
Sorry about that, guys. Got the
I do
speedy on.
that. I do that sometimes. I do that all the time, actually.
Ever since the early 20th century, Antarctica has been a point of interest for several world governments and secret societies, including the German National Socialists that sent several expeditions to the South Pole, with its third conducted in 1938, resulting in Germany annexing a part of eastern Antarctica in 1939, claiming what was formerly Norwegian territory known as Queen Maud Land and renaming it Neuschwabenland. Most of the territory is covered by the East Antarctic ice sheet and a tall ice wall.
So let's remember that real quick. Neuschwabenland. New Schwabenland would be the translation. And remember that last name, Schwab.
Carl Schwab.
Klaus Schwab, but we'll get to that later.
Klaus
So,
Schwab.
yeah, I guess it was named after a Nazi officer. I want to say he might have been an admiral. I don't know exactly if you want to bring up who the leader of that expedition was. But the expedition was also called the Expedition New Schwabenland as well. And if we look back on that seal, if we can pull it up, the seal for that expedition. He played it for a second. And
formerly Norwegian territory known as Queen Maud Land, and renaming it Neue Societies, including the German National Socialists.
But yeah, on that seal, you can see at the bottom it says the dates 38 to 39. And on the seal, you see the two oak leaves right there on each side of the year. And in the Nazi organization, the Ahnenerbe, the secret occult society that tried to study like mystic and paranormal stuff, that those two oak leaves were on their seal as well, and they're the one who sponsored this expedition. So you can kind of see cryptically some of the parent seal symbology being implanted on their expedition seal. So this was already tied into the German Ahnenerbe secret mystic paranormal society, which is interesting. Let's just keep going for a second.
Antarctica in 1939, claiming what was formerly Norwegian territory known as Queen Maud Land and renaming it Neue Schwabenland. Most of the territory is covered by the East Antarctic ice sheet and a tall ice wall stretching throughout its coast. But below the surface, there are not only massive caverns melted away from subterranean volcanic vents, but a thriving ecosystem where Germany established a U-boat base called Base 211.
So some interesting stuff there. That they sent an expedition to Antarctica that was to a section that was previously known as Queen Maud's Land, that I guess was owned by Norway, but the Nazis they claimed it for themselves and called it New Schwabenland. And that's where they started creating underground bases, giant underground bases. And I guess underneath that area was a warm water geothermic vent. And there was like a lot of sea life underneath there. So it was livable conditions, which was pretty interesting. Not something many people know about it. If we want to skip ahead, keep watching for
While the details surrounding this German outpost remain shrouded in mystery, including a military invasion of Antarctica in 1946 called Operation High Jump, which is still classified. It seems that other nations, such as Russia, are more forthcoming concerning the details of the alleged SS military colony that refused to surrender. At the beginning of 1947, yet another expedition by the American explorer Richard Byrd arrived on Antarctic shores. It was a very strange expedition. Unlike his previous three, this one was completely financed by the U.S. Navy. Operation High Jump was its code name. Under the command of Admiral R. Byrd, there was a powerful military squadron, an aircraft carrier, 12 surface ships, 1 submarine, more than 20 airplanes and helicopters, and about 5,000 people on staff. You will agree, a strange team for a scientific expedition.
Okay, so just a little bit more background story. So after World War II, we sent Admiral Byrd, and Admiral Byrd has some funny connections because wasn't he the competitor for
Sir Hubert Wilkins?
Sir Hubert Wilkins, who ended up being the first main contributor to the creation of the Urantia book and the printing of the Urantia book.
I almost don't think the Uranchi book would have went into publication if it weren't for his donations.
Yeah, so that's a cool book. I haven't read it yet. I still have to check it out. We should put that link in the description. But yeah,
We'll have
Sir
to do
Hubert
a series on
Walkins.
it.
So he and Admiral Byrd were the two forefront Antarctic researchers at the time, and they were competing for, funding and races to get for exploration. And Admiral Byrd went on to lead this expedition, Operation High Jump, with 12 freaking battleships, an aircraft carrier, 5,000 men, and a ton of airplanes and helicopters on a scientific expedition directly to where the Antarctic Nazi base was after the war. And Admiral Byrd also had some interesting things to say afterwards too. But so that is a story that not many people are familiar with, and they don't add that into the World War II history when they think about the traditional European, World War II playbook. But have you guys ever heard anything about that?
No, I haven't really looked too much into this sort of breakaway civilization Nazi UFO connection. I've just heard that they had like some advanced technology. I heard that some of that technology did come from like extraterrestrial sources. Whether it was a race that specifically tried to give them something or stuff that they found. I mean, they definitely did have, we know that they were advanced in rocketry. That's why we, used Operation Paperclip to take their scientists and use them for our own projects. But yeah, the Antarctica bases is a new kind of angle. I have heard that the reptilians have some Antarctica locations as well.
As the story goes, as I understand it, when Admiral Byrd was basically commissioned by the Navy, I believe it was.
Yeah, this is his first military expedition. The previous two expeditions were his own private funding expedition to go to the South Pole, and then the Navy was like, "Hey, this guy's already doing it. Let's throw some money at him to go get the Nazis."
It is interesting because he was a rival of Sir Hubert Wilkins. They went in these transcontinental races to compete and all that, and it was usually Admiral Byrd that got the headline. So he's largely who we remember today. But as the story goes, from what I understand, once he arrived in Antarctica, they actually found Nazis there. They had made their way through Argentina, down south.
Oh yeah, we're getting there. We're getting
there. All right, I'm jumping ahead. Yeah. Yes, I have heard about this story. It's a really interesting little part of history. I wish we learned it in school.
I know, right? What they don't tell you in school. And this is some background for how the current technocratic elite came to be. So I'm going to play a little bit more.
December 2nd, 1946. Before the start of his expedition, Admiral Byrd, at a press conference, said, "My expedition is military in nature," giving no further details. At the end of January 1947, full-scale aerial reconnaissance began surveying the Antarctic region of Queen Maud Land. It all went to plan in the first weeks. Tens of thousands of photos were taken. Suddenly, the inexplicable happened. The 6-month expedition terminated after only 2 months. Fleeing the Antarctica coast, it was a real fast retreat. They lost the destroyer, almost half their carrier-based aircraft, dozens of sailors and officers. The commission investigation members of the United States Congress, Admiral Byrd, said the following: "In the event of another war, America can be attacked by an enemy that has the ability to fly from pole to pole with incredible speed."
So that's pretty gnarly right there. Just telling this exact same story, that he had casualties. He had damaged ships, damaged helicopters coming back from a scientific expedition. It was supposed to be a 6-month expedition, but it only lasted for 2 months. Very mysterious, but we'll get back to that in a second. Let's keep going, okay? I'm going to jump around.
Okay.
Make sure I got the right timestamp.
The Anunnaki learned something incredible about Antarctica. They made the study of this continent one of the main Nazi leadership goals. Actually, the SS were after very specific knowledge. Studies were carried out concerning the paranormal abilities of employees of the Anunnaki. The results were recorded on personal files. When the war started, officers with these paranormal abilities, along with others who displayed paranormal skills, were merged into a single Anunnaki department. Unfortunately, there are no records on what this department was working on, or more importantly, what results were achieved. One of the main objectives pursued by the Anunnaki experts was the use of paranormal abilities to contact unknown beings. Part 3. Saucers. Secret Thule Society members, the Anunnaki's predecessor, among the selected were 2 experienced mediums or contactees as we say today. One of them hides under the mysterious name of Sigrun. The other is Maria Orsic from Zagreb. She speaks of strange things in a trance state, from a civilization in the Taurus constellation. She receives incredible technical information. This knowledge shocked.
Whoa.
You guys recognize any of those names? Maria Orsic. She's famous in the UFO community. Mysterious Universe talks about her a lot. If you guys know the Mysterious Universe podcast, go check them out. I love them. Shout out to, Benjamin and Andrew. They're doing awesome work. But they talk about Maria Orsic. She is a very unique figure in aerospace history, I guess. She appeared out of nowhere. Some people claim that she was like a fled Nazi scientist that took on like a Norwegian persona or something. Some people couldn't. She acted so unique that some people thought she herself was an alien. But do you hear what they're talking about? They're talking about the Nazi SS Anunnaki unit testing their own staff to see if they had paranormal capabilities to contact extraterrestrial personalities and summon UFOs. They're doing psionics back in the 30s. It's the same thing we're talking about today with Jake Barber.
You're right. That's a good
military psionics teams that are summoning UFOs and extraterrestrial entities. It's meditating and communicating with the Space Brothers. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter what words you're using. They're doing the same they're using the same mechanics to summon these beings. They're using the same techniques. They're just using different words. So it's very interesting to think about this. And Maria Orsic was the same lady who was summoning these UAPs, are saying that she was receiving technical information from beings in the Taurus constellation. And the Keys of Enoch says there's intelligent hominid beings in the Taurus constellation as well. And he doesn't even refer to it as Taurus. I think he uses like the Hebrew word for it. But very interesting. So it's just showing that the Nazi SS were performing these psionics. This psionic UAP summoning back in the 30s, 38, 39, 40s. This is pre-World War II. Kind of putting everything into frame, kind of, right? Building some background story. Wow. This is the biggest secret that I think any government can have. This is like top secret, above top secret, more than nuclear top secret. There is no bigger top secret thing than the UFO question, meeting extraterrestrials and getting technology from them. We know this in the U.S. government with all the disclosure, and maybe governments were doing it previously. I mean, let's look at the German military equipment. They were very advanced, very advanced. They had a theory that they called like qualitative superiority, that they can go into war without quantity, without numbers, but by having a quality of mechanics and a quality of tactics that would overwhelm the enemy, so you could win wars with lesser people. And they called it qualitative superiority. That's why they had night vision back then. They were some of the first to use camo. After we beat them, we started organizing our military units after their military units because they were so effective. They had the Blitzkrieg. They were the first to do this lightning warfare where you storm in with the military, then the infantry comes behind it. Just purely overwhelming force. So they were very advanced on some front, and that's part of the reason why we took a lot of their scientists, and they helped us get to the moon. Werner von Braun helped us build the Saturn V rocket. So ignoring all the negative aspects of them, like the racial extermination, they were advanced technologically. And not only were they advanced technologically, they had top secret paranormal psionics groups within there on Anerbe, which is probably like, the equivalent of what we're doing today in those top secret compartmentalized JPL, NASA psionics teams that are contacting extraterrestrials. It's just
talking about
modern 21st century military terms as opposed to 1940s Nazi terms. But yeah.
well, mentioning Werner von Braun, there is a connection there we'll get into later that actually does tie into Elon Musk, mysteriously enough.
Oh, that's where we're going with this. I'm trying to build that full comprehensive view. But yeah. So just jumping on, it's kind of very interesting that they had this going on back then. I just love that. Nazi psionics teams contacting UFOs. Fucking wild.
That's interesting.
Now let's get into a little timeline. Okay, so we have a little understanding of how this all came to be. Let's make sure I got the right timestamp. So 2131. Let's go. Check this out. So this is starting from the bird expedition. That's supposed to be 6 months long, but ends in 2 months. And it's going to give you you're going to see this year is the fucking smoking gun for UFO activity, off-world activity, and government administrative and legislation being changed in order to, interact with this phenomenon. So let's listen here.
P also didn't support that. So February, Operation High Jump ends, and they sail back to the United States,
So February, Operation High Jump ends. Okay.
returning to Washington in April. President Truman issues his executive order in March, in which the loyalty of all federal employees would be evaluated by the FBI. This is when that started, for all federal employees having to go through background checks to test their evaluation.
So that's interesting. So we go to the Nazi base, and supposedly Admiral Byrd actually made contact, and they gave him a message to give back to the United States. After this happened, the U.S. makes the FBI mandatory background checks to make sure that there's no Antarctic Nazis infiltrated in the United States government, so that all government employees have to be ran through the background so that we don't have any spies in our own internal government. So let's keep going.
Wonder how that worked.
For their loyalties. Now, at the time, the McCarthyism was running really hot, so they blamed it on the communists. But what was actually happening is that the Antarctic German infiltrators, that's what they were really after. Now, later that year, guess what?
So do you remember McCarthyism, learning that in school? McCarthyism, it was kind of like almost like a police state where people were calling the cops on their neighbor. Like, he's a communist, We were trying to get all the commies out of the United States because we were at war with Russia. This man stating that was a cover. We were actually looking for Antarctic Nazis that were infiltrating our government from the breakaway civilization in Antarctica. Let's keep going.
What happened in July? There's one that everybody should know. The Roswell event, that's right.
So Roswell happened that July. Isn't that crazy? I don't know if we lost Magma or not, but so in February, the Admiral Byrd expedition stops after he makes contact or interaction with these interesting UFO-shaped saucers that are supposedly ran by a secret sect of Antarctic Nazis. That happens in February. Background checks come out in March, and then July, Roswell happens.
Okay, whoa. That's wild. Yeah, I heard that. That is insane. I actually never put those two timelines together. They almost seem like different histories in my mind, and it's hard to, when you're looking back at history, it's hard to be mindful of the entire cohesive tapestry of all historical events happening simultaneously. But it's like, you look at like World War II history, Nazi history, and all that. That seems like one timeline. Then you got like New Mexico. That's like a totally different timeline, and like Roswell and Area 51 and all these like deep underground military bunkers. I never really pieced those two together, but it lines up perfectly.
Yeah, it's starting to line up. And a lot of the UFO reports and testimonies, especially the ones that Mysterious Universe goes over, a lot of people tend to see like German, Nordic looking humanoids that speak German and stuff on the craft.
Like the tall whites.
Yeah,
I mean, I
something
guess
like
that'd be a
that.
different thing, but that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so let's keep going. The timeline, the plot thickens.
Now, do you find it highly suspect that the same month that the Roswell event happened is also when the National Security Council and the CIA were created?
Yeah.
Same month.
Yeah,
Now,
good point.
the CIA took over from the Operation of State Security, OSS, which was handled by the military. After the president enacted the CIA, it was now handled by civilians, which meant that the military was out. And they washed their hands of it. That's right. They were able to get the civilians in there so that the civilians could then control. September.
See, that's an important aspect to remember right now. So now the CIA is a civilian organization. So now you don't need to go through the military in order to get to these secret programs. You can start maybe if just holding the woo in suspense for a bit. If the Antarctic Nazis are in control of everything, now it makes it easier for them to get their own people into positions of secret government programs because they don't need to go to the military anymore. They can just go directly to the CIA from a civilian position, if that makes sense.
Okay.
You know
There's less of a.
what's funny is that
I need to pee real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you're good.
In Captain America, in one of the Captain America movies, they kind of have this idea, with the, what do they call it? The octopus organization that's like living in the background.
You're right.
Do you know what the name is?
I'm familiar with that.
Hydra. Yeah.
Hydra, yeah. It was
So
like Hell
obviously,
Hydra.
you go back to the first Captain America, and he is in World War II, but they place this, or no, maybe is it war? I don't know. Maybe it's an alternate thing, but there's a war, and
it was World
instead
War II,
of
sure.
or maybe they do even pitch it's a war with the Nazis, but within the Nazi group, there's this Hydra, group, which is like the inner circle, and they become a breakaway civilization, a secret society in the future that later infiltrates the government, has like advanced technology. And so notice that everything we just said, is sort of, those ideas are contained with that in that movie. And you go, okay, why? Which one is the fiction? Now, I guess this Antarctica conspiracy and the Nazi stuff conspiracy has been going on since the end of World War II, And so it's actually the writers of the Marvel comics that tapped into these ideas because they were interesting. They had like threads of reality, and they expounded them into stories.
A lot of those Marvel plots surprisingly do.
Right. Even and of course, it's dramatized, for the sake of a movie.
The extreme.
But even let's see, what was I going to say there? I was going to say, there's a Disney show that covers the guy who builds the Avengers team. I'm forgetting I'm blanking on his name, but he's got the eye patch.
Oh shit!
It's like a show with him, and
Samuel Jackson.
Yeah, Samuel Jackson.
Yeah, Samuel Jackson.
And so the
guy.
main premise of this show is that there's an alien race living here, and they look kind of reptilian, like a reptilian humanoid, but they can mask their appearance and as a human, and so they're living among human society, and they're like somewhat in positions of power. So it ties into that direct sort of reptilian, concept of reptilians
Captain
and
Marvel,
political power and stuff. And that's another interesting crossover where it's like, well, that's like a theme within this within the world of the woo and the UFOs and the aliens among us.
World of the woo.
There's actually like I guess you could say real accounts or contactee encounters or reports. And so I just want to point out that these concepts have been around for so long that they've been, encoded into our fiction. However, if they were to be confirmed true, a lot of people would say, oh, what? So I guess we're living in a Marvel movie? It's like, well, no, it's in reverse. we are living in real life, and real life has a lot of these things, going on potentially in the background, and they've been talked about for a long time, and they've been coded into our fantasy. So I always just like to point that out, and then you can get more specific and start to say, talk about CIA's involvement in funding Hollywood projects. That's sort of a separate line of thinking, but I don't even think we have to go there, because it's obvious that script writers and screenwriters take inspiration from the real world of the UFO phenomenon, because it's like real science fiction, and there's like there's actual real ideas. Instead of making up new ideas, they can pull stuff that has a backstory already and then flesh it out.
Yeah, get real creative, has kind of a connection to the real world, so it makes it more realistic. Great script writing, baby. Give me that money. Yep. Yeah, and then just this last part real quick, but we are going to tie it into the media as well. Guess what else gets created a couple months later?
That's right. They were able to get the civilians in there so that the civilians could then control. September of later that year, Majestic 12 was created, again, for dealing with alien politics or alien recovered craft or technologies. Now, when Admiral Byrd left Antarctica, he took a message with him. Now, there are alleged reports that he made a statement to a newspaper about the threat and about an enemy capable of incredible feats. Well, the other message that he took with him was from the Antarctic Germans, in which they were requiring a meeting so that they could negotiate a truce, a ceasefire. Well, the Antarctic Germans needed to have some time so that they could build up their defenses. That's what they wanted to do. They had a fleet of anti-gravitic craft, but it wasn't enough to take on an entire globe of people or allies that would have been aligned against them. So they wanted some time to build up their forces. And they also knew that the allies had nothing that could compare to their technologies.
This is a good time to
So that was the other message that they gave Admiral Byrd, and that's, I guess, why he was so shaken when he was interviewed. He kind of seemed like distraught, and he said, "We're going to fight someone who has the technology." But I guess he had another message in the back of his head that he couldn't disclose to that reporter, and it was a direct message from the Antarctic Nazis saying, "Ceasefire. We want to come to the table with relations. We have super advanced technology, and you guys got to play ball."
Man, I got to say, like you mentioned Indiana Jones earlier, it is probably one of the funnest plots in a movie. Nazis are the perfect bad guys for a movie. And there's a really good movie to be made here about, the Nazis actually never died off. They've been alive in Antarctica the whole time with a secret fleet of UFOs. So, like the Nazis get killed off basically in Indiana Jones. They randomly kind of bring them back in this little thing in the last movie, but man, there's a good movie to be made there.
Oh yeah, this is the best movie. Let's just power through this so we have some background story.
And we see the seal of the first German Antarctic expedition, 1938-39. We see here quietly the oak leaves of this is oak, right? Yeah. The oak leaves of the Thule Society. It was under the sponsorship of the secret patronage of the Thule Society. The Germans were fascinated with the South Pole, the Thule people. When Greenland was still not under ice, there was a tall, blonde, Nordic-looking race that lived there, and later moved to the inner of the Earth, and still lives there, flying their saucers, much more advanced than their lagging, should I call them retarded brothers on the surface of the planet. And so it has been the secret dream of the Germans on the surface to find and to reunite with their more advanced Aryan brothers from the inner Earth, according to German and secret SS mythology. Much later, photographs appeared in the late 40s of the German colony in the Neuschwabenland from an altitude way above and beyond the altitude of the biggest stratospheric bombers at the time, which was about 10, 12 kilometers. This is an altitude of 60, 70 kilometers, maybe 100 kilometers, basically Earth's orbit. And the speculation is that this is a photograph of the German South Polar colony from a saucer, from that height.
So that was interesting. I've never seen that photo before. It looks so blurry, but
It's a very high contrast photo.
Yeah, it's supposed to be really high up, higher than any airplane, and that was some evidence that it was a photograph from one of the UFOs. I don't know how you want to take it as you will, but kind of cool.
There were German transport submarines that could hold 5,000 tons, that were 5,000 deadweight tons, which is about 2.5 times as much as the standard Allied Liberty class transport ships.
You hear that? That's something that you have to take, that not many people are taking into account. The Germans were able to make U-boats that could hold twice as much as the biggest Allied transport ship. And these are submarines underground. The amount of raw material and people they can move at will is insane. It's something that we have to keep in the back of our mind to make this entire plot work.
The Germans had 2.5 times bigger submarines than the Allies were building surface ships. These submarines were so huge they could carry bulk cargo, they could carry personnel, they could carry armaments, anything. What exactly is going on the South Pole? Admiral Byrd lost in about 2 weeks most of his planes and retreated in disgrace and made an unauthorized interview which probably cost him his career in Argentina on his way back, quite probably, refueling or reloading with supplies in an Argentinian port. He had the lack of political insight to make this politically incorrect interview, saying that I think the next world war will be with an adversary that comes from the polar regions and that has the ability to fly unobstructed from pole to pole. Clearly talking about the German South Polar presence and their ability to outfly anything the Americans could confront them with.
Hitler didn't want war with England.
Terrestrial small-time politics.
So December, Operation Windmill was published as we're going to make our base down in Antarctica, which in actuality what it was is part of the negotiations between the Antarctic Germans and the rest of the planet. Guess what happened in the next year? Operation Mockingbird had its starts. So these all go back to a very busy 1947, 1948. Now,
you hear that? So the first operation to create the first Antarctic base, that was a front to actually do negotiations with the Antarctic Nazis. And then right after, Operation Mockingbird hits. And that's to, take over news and media outlets for psychological operations to portray to the world stage what you want on screen. Every time you see those videos of a bunch of different news stations saying the exact same phrase over and over again, that's from Operation Mockingbird. The CIA giving out little blurbs and statements to every news outlet so that they can mind control or influence different groups of societies in different areas of the world. So it's interesting that all these are lining up at around the exact same dates. Very busy 1947, 1948. This was the man who was in charge of that program when it came out. He was, I think he might be dead now, but this is an older video of him. Let's see here. Let's fast forward to the good shit. Well,
Frank Wisner was a member of the CIA and was put in charge of propaganda and the controlling of the media. After what happened with Roswell, they did not want to go through another incident like that. So they decided that they would take it on head first. Well,
see? Like everything ties back to the aliens. All these Mockingbird to control the media. It's because remember Roswell happened on accident. was it Philip J. Corso? He came to the local newspaper first saying we found UFO, and the next day the feds, a big army came in and said, no, that didn't happen.
I don't think it was Corso that actually did their report. Corso was involved later. But yeah.
Whoever was the base commander of that local base came out and said it. You're right. I think Philip J. Corso might have been the big army. But yeah, so some interesting stuff. And it always leads back to the aliens. People say the government's controlling the media outlets. Yeah, it started because of the whole Roswell incident.
And that's where you start hearing phrases like the crashed UFO was nothing but swamp gas, or we can neither confirm nor deny the validity of these statements.
Yeah, so it's all because the UFO and the anti-grav technology is the biggest top secret. That's when the government's going to go to the greatest lengths to start doing these psychological operations to cover up that truth. So it all has its ties. All the tendrils start leading back to the anti-grav UFO phenomenon.
How do you do that? Well, you pay a bunch of people that are...
All right, let's go to... I swear, guys, we're almost done. But it is kind of interesting. Just want to give you some backstory of everything. It's gonna wrap it up in a second.
You're really setting the stage here.
No, it did not. So in February, Operation Windmill 2 was finished up, in which the Antarctic Germans reached a ceasefire with the cabal. Now, they had expected a formal treaty to follow. And so what they wanted was, again, to buy some more time.
So now he introduces a new thing called the cabal. He's saying the cabal is all the elites of the normal world who don't have anti-grav technology. The secret elites. So he's saying there's two factions now. The secret Antarctic Nazis who are holding anti-grav above the bankers and the elites. So there's two factions and they're fighting for control over the planet. So the plot thickens. So the Antarctic government is trying to have a ceasefire with the cabal. So the allies, the rest of the sovereign world. So now start thinking in your head two different factions fighting for control. The normal elites of planet Earth versus the Antarctic government who's in contact with ETs. And that's why the that's when the ET concept starts becoming a governmented, compartmentalized issue that starts to become a reality at the top secret levels, but has bubbled up to the forefront today. So let's keep going with it.
So that was what happened in 1948. The ceasefire agreement established the Antarctic Germans as a sovereign nation. Their existence was to be kept secret. The reasons for that have to do with the Antarctic Germans were threatening to go public with advanced technologies, and the cabal did not want that to happen because they wanted to maintain control. The other thing that the cabal had going for it at the time was that if the Antarctic Germans had gone public, there is a very strong possibility that the rest of the globe, the personnel, the citizens would have said, you know what? Even if it means nuclear annihilation for us all, let's get rid of those Nazis once and for all. So they kept it secret because the politicians knew that they may not have a choice if it went public. They would be out of their control from the citizens of the planet. They established their embassies. They have at least one senior executive and thousands of corporations. Now, what kind of corporations? Now, we're talking about Ivy League schools. We're talking about engineering research schools. We're talking about defense contractors, agriculture, medical, research hospitals, banks, everything imaginable. They had at least one senior executive, because again, they had 300,000 people to do something with. And their plan was to infiltrate the rest of the planet so
there
that
is
they
Werner
would
von
have their
Braun.
own people in place. One of the consolations that they provided to the cabal was that they gave them base theories, not technology, but base theories. So they had to do their own homework. Now, having their own people in place meant that essentially they were giving themselves advanced
Look at that. He's
theories.
a Nazi.
So no harm, no foul, because they're just giving it to themselves. right? Well, their own people being executives in these companies, the process of advancement, well, you've got somebody who has a leg up already because they've got advanced technology knowledge. And suddenly they are on a fast track to the CEO or senior executive or any number of other positions. Now, 1948 through 1954, the cabal was stalling for time because they knew that they could not stand toe-to-toe with the Antarctic Germans.
So that now you're starting to hear the angle that I'm getting into. So the cabal versus the Antarctic government, and the Antarctic government, they said they want to put people in positions of power in every company, every institute, every governmental board, even private companies. So that's the angle I'm starting to tickle at the moment. They were showing just pictures of Werner von Braun. Obviously, he's a good frontman for that. And, he's an ex-Nazi, so he could take direct orders from the top head honchos underneath the ice caps in Antarctica. So they already have their tendrils, like you said, Hydra, in every organization, every state that they want in order to, keep it going.
Oh, yeah, that Werner von Braun, he's a good guy.
I would propose that there is now a third faction, which is basically catching up to what these other two factions have been up to all these years. And that third faction is represented by Lou Elizondo and the new UAP scientist, who basically, Lou's program, he got into this. He was under sort of Harry Reid's funding for the ATIP program, 22 million. And so once he gets into this, he does quickly collide at some point with what he calls the legacy programs. And that name has been thrown around a lot, including David Grush. And so these new UAP programs find out that there is a long history of the legacy programs. And they're like, well, can we get access? And they're being told no. And so there's some level, there's kind of a rift then in some of the military aspect. And people like Lou also see, oh, this is a problem. There's a whole lack of oversight on these legacy programs. Like, how has this gone on for so long? I do wonder, like, how much does Lou know about how deep the legacy program goes? Does he know stories about the Antarctica stuff?
Dude, that's a good point because from what I understand, I don't know if it was ATIP directly, but I know a lot of the programs that Lou Elizondo worked for was funded by this eccentric, wealthy man. I don't know if he was a millionaire or billionaire or what, but Robert Bigelow. He founds Bigelow Aerospace in the late 90s. And he's got the angle of like Skinwalker Ranch and all that, and that is why the military was actually involved in this obscure ranch where there's UAP sightings and all that. And it's worth considering because you talk about a new faction. Now that we've fast forwarded through history, a lot of these groups that we're talking about here at this point during the 40s and 50s are kind of like the legacy program, and they were the foundation of what we have today. Now we actually have multiple different interest groups competing, which I would love to get into
including
later.
Venture capitalists. That's why I say the new faction, the next faction is the venture capitalist and the scientists who start taking this seriously, and they're like, I want the anti-gravity tech. I want the knowledge. I want the math. I don't want to work on this old science. I want the new stuff. That's sort of waking up now, and that's part of the public-private sector that, some people are saying Elon Musk, once he finds out about it, he'll go for the money, too.
Dude,
Jake Barber's crew is founded by venture capitalists who want the technology.
That's right.
Anyone would.
Jake Barber talks about working for these like kind of mysterious figures as a contractor, just a private contractor doing these jobs, and he didn't even know exactly who he was working for. D-Bake, actually, before you go forward, you really stimulated some connections in my mind here, talking about the Cabal as one interest group that didn't have the anti-grav technology, then a higher secretive elite that actually does. This brings up, it kind of illuminates in my mind two concurrent threads of history that suddenly make sense. If we were to assume that this far-fetched theory of Antarctic Germans with UFOs is
Hell
actually
yeah.
true. If we're to assume that's
Cosmic
true,
road trip, baby.
on one hand, it explains why UFO disclosure has been so highly secretive. They can't let the public know. You're like, who are these adversaries? Like, is it really that bad if the Chinese know we have UFOs, or do the Chinese and the Russians really pose that great of a threat to us? Like, it almost seems like these threats are artificial. Maybe that's just a cover because they can't reveal to the Antarctic Germans or this even higher adversarial force we don't know about. So they're working on it very top secret. It also explains the entire space race. Why were we so urgently trying to get to space, put our flag on the moon, prove that we can get to space before the Russians and all that? Maybe there's this race to try to move forward in time and prove like, hey, we can get out to space. We got the stuff. Damn, that's fascinating.
Yeah, right. It's very, very compelling. Yeah, let's wrap it up because this will be a good foundation for the rest of the conversation. So
Cool.
A little bit more of some evidence on why the Antarctic Germans may actually be in control. Something interesting happens, so check it out.
Now, one of the things that they provided as a good faith, at least that's what they called, the cabal provided the London Debt Agreement, in which all of Germany's, now conventional Germany, not Antarctic Germany, the Antarctic Germans still had a connection and a love for their homeland. So the cabal took advantage of that and said, okay, look, give us some more time and we will forgive all the war debt before and after World War II. So this goes back to World War I. Now, we think that the United States debt of, what, 22 trillion is high? How about 1,000 trillion that they forgave in equivalent modern dollars?
So there's a gnarly point right there. I guess after World War II, the cabal was, in order to show generosity to the Antarctic Germans, they forgave all German war debt from World War I and World War II.
That's interesting.
Like, we only have $22 trillion debt, and they had equivalent to over $100 trillion debt, and we just forgave it. I wonder why, you know?
Those are numbers we can't even comprehend. That's a lot of money.
And was that part of the trade agreement with the AG, the Antarctic government, the Antarctic Germans? You know, so there's a debt erasure of German war debts, interestingly enough. Go ahead.
I mean, it's about the size of the United States. It has every natural resource, from oil and coal to uranium to gold and silver. Now, has there been another spot on the planet that corporations wouldn't go into to drill for oil? Think about the depths that they would go to in the ocean, or the fracking, or the lengths that they will go to. Well, why didn't they do it in Antarctica? It's got all these resources. Well, it's because of the Antarctic Treaty. There were two components to the Antarctic Treaty. There was a public version and then there was a classified version. The Operation Deep Freeze 1 and 2 was the operation in which the cabal had built and established their base in Antarctica, and it also allowed for them to go through the negotiations with the Antarctic Germans. This time was also when the Antarctic Germans continued their political espionage, because they wanted to infiltrate every country, not just one, but every country, every major corporation, every major organization on the planet. That was how they were going to run their things, and that's how they were able to gain control over technology. So 1959 was the year that the Antarctic Treaty was enacted. Now, what did the Antarctic Treaty, the classified portion, what did it do? Well, it granted the Antarctic Germans about 150,000 personnel from the rest of the world. Now, what does that mean? They were going to pick them up from a place and time of their choosing. They had assured the rest of the leaders of the world that they would pay them and take care of them and feed and house them and give them fair medical treatment and anything that they needed. Give them the opportunity to become German citizens if they so chose at the end of 5 years. If they didn't, oh, well, okay, they would send them back home. That didn't happen. Surprise. Also, as part of the Antarctic Treaty, is that they had at least one Antarctic German on the governing board of directors. So not only do they have senior executives, at least one, the larger corporations had 5 to 10, but they've got now their own people on the board of directors. And thousands of worldwide corporations, universities, medical research facilities, banks, financial institutions, you name it. The other portion of their plan was to have at least one executive, one of their citizens on the executive branch of every government on the planet, at least one. The United States had multiple civilians from the Antarctic Germans within the government. Now,
so that was one of the main wrapping up points I wanted to hit. I got a couple more clips, but yeah, so that they're one of the treaty, the secret treaty is parameters is that an AG, I'm going to say AG for Antarctic Germans, an AG member has to be on the board of all the big corporations, like the Fortune 500, all the big boy corporations, and on the board or in some type of leading influential position for government as well. So holding all this in the back of our mind while we keep the conversation going. And it also shows interesting that there's so many natural resources in Antarctica. Everything, gold, silver, and like if we find that anywhere else, we plunder it straight up. We advance technology to the point where we can plunder it. It's interesting that we haven't gone to Antarctica to do this yet, you know?
That was something I actually forgot to mention when I was talking about concurrent threads that suddenly make sense. But like, I'm really glad you played that clip because Antarctica is this vast continent rich with resources, oil, minerals, everything you can imagine. Why aren't we mining there? And I know that's what gets flat earthers going. They talk about, well, you can't go there because it's the end of the earth, you know, and it's pretty silly. But it fuels so many conspiracy theories. Why Antarctica, this barren wasteland, is one of the most highly restrictive airspaces. It's this continent no one can really go to. I got to check out this video. This looks really interesting. But
yeah,
it suddenly makes sense. Like, because that territory is already owned, we don't belong there.
Yeah, the AG is real. Now let's tie it into current day society.
Temporal interference, if they messed around or tried to monkey with timelines in the past.
So this is from the former head of Israel's space program, Chaim Ashed, who says that aliens have been in contact with the U.S. and with Israel. What does he refer to? The Galactic Federation, that he says has been in touch with Israel and the U.S. He also says that Donald Trump was going to reveal their existence, but then basically got talked out of it, I suppose.
Yeah, and look, he's 87 years old. According to him, he says he has nothing to lose. He's a decorated former Israeli general, former space security chief. He's been awarded a medal 3 separate times, 2 secretly, for actions that kept Israel safe. Clearly somebody who was regarded well by that government. Now, what he's saying is kind of crazy. He says that the cooperation of, there's a secret pact between the U.S. government and the Galactic Federation, that the cooperation includes a secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives.
A high-ranking and distinguished former Israeli space security chief not only claimed that extraterrestrials exist and President Trump knows about it, but that a Galactic Federation also exists and is waiting to make official contact. Allegedly, contact has already been established long ago with governments of the world, since he claims that the United States already has military personnel in underground bases on Mars.
Well, this is quite a story. And
That's pretty crazy, right? So it's just evidence.
That's
It shows
crazy.
you know, the cabal and Trump was a wild card in this entire geopolitical game, and maybe the AG got kind of scared when Trump got
That's
elected.
why they're trying to take
And
him out.
all this kind of geopolitical games happening right now. Trump supposed to be knowing about it, but got talked down from revealing it to the public because he was about to tell us. You know, they're eating the cats, they're
Trump
eating the
said
pets.
they talked him out of revealing JFK in his first term. And
Yeah.
so, you know, it kind of vibes with this too. Like he wanted to, he was willing to put stuff out, but they kind of talked him out of it. We'll see what happens this time around. But another thing that reminds me of that we talked about last week is on Joe Rogan's podcast, Trump says a lot of people are interested in the people coming from space. And
Yeah.
it's just an interesting way to say it. And, you know, I've never heard
People
anyone
coming
being,
from
people
space.
coming from space versus, you know, aliens and ET. And then he goes on to say, he's like, me personally, you know, I'm not a believer. I'm not really into it. But, you know, my people say that they've seen some stuff. You know, Navy pilots or Air Force pilots say that they've seen some interesting things. So I don't know. It's like, I guess he, you know, he knows how to bluff. He knows how to say things without saying
yeah.
anything.
Part of the
So
deal.
like, I guess he could know. But I feel like maybe he's been given the overview, but he doesn't necessarily has like seen a bunch of videos or anything. Or as the president, he was told, yes, there's, you know, we need Space Force to do a couple things in this range. However, you know, he's like, you know, I feel like has got so much else to do, and maybe he's like,
Yeah.
hey, should we talk about this? Should we not talk about this? And then he's just like takes his advisor's advice. I mean, yeah, I have a weird point of data that talks about U.S. Space Force personnel, a select group working with a very human-looking species that we would probably call the Pleiadians on a secret moon base. So, you know, what we just heard there was a secret Mars base. And so, yeah, it kind of, you know, checks out. And I'm just really hoping that we hear something significant, you know, from Trump about this concept, you know, in these next 4 years. Hopefully, you know, Jake Barber and the other whistleblowers will start to force their hand.
You know, it is interesting since you mentioned it that Trump made an effort to instate a space force. He's really gunning for that. Now he's partnering up with Elon, and his major prime directive is get to Mars. We have to occupy Mars. What's up with that? Why Mars? Why is that relevant? Why is that what we need to do right now? And you know, he's got his reasons. We need a backup civilization in case anything goes wrong here, that kind of stuff. But could those just be excuses? We can't handle the truth. I gotta recommend, you gotta check out this documentary. I found it for free on, I think it was Tubi or something like that. I just looked up where to watch it. Absolutely worth watching. You would get really into it. But it was called, I believe it was called Walking with the Tall Whites. You gotta look it up. Walking with the Tall Whites. It's this guy's experience. He's old now. Throughout the Vietnam War, just before he got deployed, he was a weatherman stationed at a little weather post in, I believe it was Nevada, way out in the middle of nowhere, out in the desert. And when he was going to work there, a lot of his other associates were really nervous about this place. They didn't want to be stationed out at this post. And he's like, oh, what's the big deal? So he goes out there. He keeps having these encounters with what he describes as tall whites. They're like human people, but pale white skin, not just like white people. They got like snow white skin, small mouths, either no ears or small ears, something like that, big eyes. And they come from another world. They're here to, I guess our world. They got dealt kind of a worse hand with their world, and they really like our world, so they're trying to like kind of station themselves here, secretly cooperate with our military. It's one of those things, obviously, like any of this, you got to take with a grain of salt. But when you hear this guy tell a story the way he felt, his story's so rich with details and experience, it's really difficult not to believe him. So I would absolutely recommend that one. Very thought-provoking.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I guess we were revealing too much. I don't know if it was the cabal or the AG, but they wanted to shut me down. Internet fell out. I could have sworn I heard some German coming from behind my window, but I don't know. Let's wrap this up. Let's wrap my segment up.
All right.
We can get on to it.
I am hearing your fire alarm chirping.
Yeah, it just started this like right before I started this, so sorry about that, guys. Here, let me close that door real quick.
NSA hacked your fire alarm. They're doing anything they can.
They were about 1 hour 12 minutes in here, and then yeah.
Yep,
So
shout out to the chat. I see everybody in there. Make sure that you do like this video. I don't see as many likes in there, so hit that thumbs up if you can. Just a quick little, pop, and it'll help get us video to the front. And let's wrap up my segment, yeah. Alrighty. So you guys have been with us. I don't have to recap it. Let's do it.
Our country, it doesn't.
So 1980s was also the same time frame that Voyager 1 and 2 were passing the Jupiter-Saturn area. And one of the things that Voyager 1 did for the Cabal was it informed them just how much build-out the Antarctic Germans had, just how much infiltration alien races were making into our solar system. It scared them. They didn't realize just how much the Antarctic Germans had built out.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
And so they altered their plans for world domination to speed up the timeline. Originally, they were thinking that they would do it over a period of a century or more. Well, they shortened the timeline to make it happen faster. Now, the reasons and how they did that was by you create a disease and you create the cure at the same time. You poison the food. You dumb down the education system. You keep promoting a fiat currency system. You conduct false flags so that the people ask for more security, so that the people are wanting to have a security state. So eventually, that's what they were wanting to do, is to get under a single despotic one world government. It turned out that what was happening through these false flags was they were setting up cabal operations. If you can imagine they were trying to set up the planet for a cabal-like operation. They didn't want to wait 100 years or more to reach a single.
That's Biden shaking Klaus Schwab. That's Klaus Schwab right there. That's the great-grandson of the guy from New Schwabia, New Schwabenland. See, like literally, he could be a representative from the Antarctic government to the world. He's the leader of the World Economic Forum. That is the one who mandated the COVID vaccines, everything, educational vaccines, Bill Gates, everything. If you're a young global leader, if you're any type of leader, you show up to Davos World Economic Forum event, and they're not even elected officials, and they tell presidents how to do procedures and mandates.
They're
like,
unelected
doesn't that
officials.
make sense? The Antarctic government.
It makes so much sense. They're unelected officials with supreme
Schwab,
authority.
The grandson.
They're above the law.
It's like, yeah.
They can make mandates sweeping across the entire globe that affects everyone, and none of us have anything we can do about it.
And this dude literally dresses like freaking Darth Vader and has a German accent. Let's see. How do you spell his last name?
Schwab. Darth Vader. Ooh.
Look at this. Look how he dresses.
You're right. Dude,
This
look
is
at that.
freaking Klaus Schwab, dude, the grandson of the dude for New Schwabiland for the Antarctic Nazi bases,
like
and he's
Darth
dressing like
Vader.
fucking Darth Vader,
Oh
the
my
leader of the
God.
world economic. Like, is it not right in front of us, guys? Come on.
I've never
Vader's real.
seen that type of garb before. Like,
Me
what's
neither.
the background? Yeah, it's like it reminds me of something. The Pope wears things that are kind of like extravagant like that,
Like
but
that,
there's
yeah.
like
It's
a
like the
history
dark
of it.
version.
I've just never
Pointy
seen.
shoulders.
I didn't like. What's the history of this? You got the
Look at
leather.
the image.
Probably an ET civilization that they
Yeah.
had interaction
Oh,
with.
it does
those
look
ice
kind of
caps.
spacey.
Go back to Google Images and look at the one right under that. Yeah, right under that. The one
Oh
underneath.
yeah,
Yeah,
you get
that
a
one.
bigger,
Dude,
you get more of a.
what is up with that? What are those patches he's wearing? What is that, like the
Yeah, right.
chaos
What
Disgusting
are those
symbol or
patches?
something? What is it? Yeah.
That's wild, dog. See, this is making sense, right? It's the Nazis, Antarctic Nazis, Antarctic Germans. That's one faction, and I think the cabal.
Interesting.
I think we're starting to catch up with them in anti-grav tech. I think the
Hmm.
cabal is so. That's where the TR3B comes in and stuff.
Okay, so you brought up a really good point there, and
that's my segment, boys.
damn, all right, that's actually a great segue into my segment. I got a lot to cover, so I'll fly through it. But this is gonna blow your minds. What's man, we're
Connecting that to Elon too, because Werner von Braun was one of these people who wrote the Elon.
Yeah.
And all these Antarctic government, they're like placing people in positions of power and supporting them. Just weird. And Elon getting space technology, government contracts. It's all like, what the fuck is going on?
I'm trying to kind of compile my thoughts after that heavy dose of information you just fed me, but like, so one of the directions I'm heading in with my research is that you have two factions. This one really brilliant investigative journalist, Whitney Webb, she talks about how she believes there are two factions, and in an interview with PBD, he's asking her, why are they trying to take out Trump? Why are they trying so heavily to try to disenfranchise him and all that? They didn't want him to get into power. If he's one of the elites, why are the elites trying to crush him? She proposes Trump is a part of a different group, basically.
I can see that. I can see that, yeah.
You have this one group that you could tie together with the World Economic Forum, with the the young global leaders, and it's very kind of democratic. And this transcends politics altogether. Well, it doesn't. It's all politics, but it transcends the Republican Democrat. Kinda, in a way, it doesn't even. But like, so this whole democracy thing. There are, and I'll get into this, but this neo-reactionary movement, which I'll learn y'all about, they basically believe democracy is bad because democracy is basically akin to communism. And when you showed me that raising fist, that was actually like a Klaus Schwab logo. You see that everywhere, the Black Lives Matter, it's like all the recent movements going on, they all raise that fist. And that has its origins with like Karl Marx and all that. And it's this what feels like a grassroots populist movement to take down the government, power to the people, but it's essentially pure democracy where everyone has a voice. And apparently this other group Trump is a part of, with like the Trilateral Commission and a lot of these other corporate interests, they're directly opposed to that. They have a very different vision of, actually the opposite vision. They believe democracy basically leads to that, like a communist revolt where you end up still getting this void of power that corrupt, crooked figures can inject themselves into. And so basically what they want to institute is a corporatocracy where they can prevent crooked leaders from entering that void, but are they themselves not crooked leaders? That's what I speculate about. So here, I'll jump into this. Go ahead and share my screen here. All right. So our story starts here with Technocracy, the Technocracy movement. I'm going to move my camera to the side a little.
Oh, is that one of the symbols you put on the thumbnail? I was wondering what those symbols were. I was like, what the hell does this mean?
So
I was going crazy. Schizo.
Oh, you have no idea.
taking the Tau to a Taunology, technology plus
Taunology. Some technology right there. Now, I'll just briefly read this little description here, and then I'll kind of go into it. So, the Technocracy movement was a social movement active in the United States and Canada in the 1930s, which favored technocracy as a system of government over representative democracy and concomitant partisan politics. Historians associate the movement with engineer Howard Scott's Technical Alliance and Technocracy Incorporated, prior to the international factionalism that dissolved the latter organization during the Second World War. Technocracy was ultimately overshadowed by other proposals for dealing with the crisis of the Great Depression. The Technocracy movement proposed replacing partisan politics and business people with scientists and engineers who had the technical expertise to manage the economy. But the movement did not fully aspire to scientocracy. The movement was committed to abstaining from all partisan politics and communist revolution. It gained strength in the 1930s, but in 1940, due to opposition to the Second World War, it was banned in Canada. The ban was lifted in 1943 when it was apparent that Technocracy Inc. was committed to the war effort, proposing a program of total conscription. The movement continued to expand during the remainder of the war, and new sections were formed in Ontario and the Maritime provinces. Now, the Canada connection is actually important, and it comes up later.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It's really close to, yeah.
It's really close to what?
One of the entrances of the secret bases, but I don't want to interrupt.
Okay. The Technocracy movement survived into the 21st century, and I didn't know that. That's interesting. And as of 2013,
look at Hunter Biden's tattoo. Never mind, I'm not going to go into
it. What has he got a tattoo of?
The Finger Lakes in Canada on the back of his back.
What?
Yeah, and it's supposed to be that's like a secret entrance of another huge UFO base.
Whoa. But, okay.
I don't know if Taychella wants to pull it up for the people, but whatever, keep reading.
All right.
A photo? I don't know.
The Hunter Biden tattoo, back tattoo.
That's wild.
Well, Tyler could pull it up. I'm sharing his screen.
Yeah, here. I'll pull that up real quick. Hunter.
Is this gonna get us? Is this gonna get us shadow banned?
Right. Maybe. It's canceled.
You know, it's a risk worth taking. Oh, look at that. Yeah,
and, he's part of that deep state cabal.
Why? Why that?
Exactly. And there's supposed to be a lot of missing 411 cases around that area.
Ooh, okay. All right, so the Technocracy movement survived into the 21st century, and as of 2013 was continuing to publish a newsletter, maintain a website, and hold member meetings. The Technocracy Inc. Website was later stating that it was under renovation, under new ownership, announcing a transition plan 2016, and an online meeting in April 2021. Smaller groups included the Technical Alliance, the New Machine, and the Utopian Society of America.
See, these all sound really weird. I wouldn't be surprised if this was WEF/Antarctic German infiltrated, because like these groups, remember they have like no face. They like to use other groups that already exist that align with their interests, and then take over that group and use them to further their agenda. They could not even give a shit about the group, just like LGBTQ or shit like that, or Black Lives Matter. They're using that group as a vassal to get their agenda across. They don't really care about the people, so it's like it sounds kind of weird. Maybe this could have been one of those groups too. Another thing to note, side note, is that supposedly Canada has completely been compromised by those Antarctic Nazis. The same dude does another video about it, how Justin Trudeau came directly from the WF Young Global Leader program. And that, he during the very beginning of the Ukraine war, we can pull up the video. I don't know if you want to do it for the people, but they had a Nazi officer, esteemed officer, walk down the Canadian Parliament, and they were all like high-fiving him and playing full music for him, and they honored him, saying that he fought Russians.
They apologize for it. They left out a public apology. Do they show
that's not the exact. Oh, is that it right there?
The speaker.
I don't know when
they're not going to show it.
Probably not. You might have to go to Reddit or something. But they angled it like he fought off Russians. He was a Russian because when Ukraine and Russia popped off, it was all about killing Russians. So they like regaled him through the hall, and they're like, "Look at this guy! He fought Russians." And then you realize, wait, when did he fight Russians? Oh, he was a Nazi that fought Russians.
Well, was this the guy?
I think this is the fool right here.
What's that arm raise he's doing there?
But it was twice.
Okay.
It was twice in the beginning and the end of the speech, and then you realize, oh, he fought the Russians as a Nazi. So like that kind of stuff happening in the Canadian government. Supposedly, Trudeau allows it because he's just a pawn for the Antarctic Germans.
Okay. You're bringing some hot takes to this that I was not aware of. So it's amazing the new connections you can kind of make with this information. So
Canada.
And I'll just read the brief overview here, and then I would totally recommend for anyone else to check out the rest of this because it's a very, very interesting little hidden part of history that's shockingly relevant to everything we're experiencing in Silicon Valley right now. So Technocracy advocates contended that price system-based forms of government and economy are structurally incapable of effective action, and promoted a society headed by technical experts, which they argued would be more rational and productive. The coming of the Great Depression ushered in radically different ideas of social engineering, culminating in reforms introduced by the New Deal. By late 1932, various groups across the United States were calling themselves Technocrats and proposing reforms. By the mid-1930s, interest in the technocracy movement was declining. Some historians have attributed the decline of the technocracy movement to the rise of Roosevelt's New Deal. Historian William E. Atkin rejects that thesis, arguing instead that the movement declined in the mid-1930s as a result of the failure of its proponents to devise a viable political theory for achieving change. Although many technocrats in the United States were sympathetic to the electoral efforts of anti-New Deal third parties, one of the most widely circulated images in Technocracy Inc.'s promotional materials used the example of a streetcar to argue that engineering solutions will always succeed where legislation or fines fail to adequately deal with social problems. If passengers insist on riding on the car's dangerous outer platform, the solution consists in designing cars without platforms. And so that sets the foundation for the technocracy attitude that engineers know what's best. And in a way, I can agree with that. It makes sense. Like an engineer, you're very technically minded, you're solution oriented, you're focused on solving problems. And so if you can tackle humanity's greatest problems, maybe we can make great progress. Now, as this develops into the future, technocracy and modern technocrats form a resentment towards government bureaucracy, which they feel slows them down, and they want to do away with the government. So I'll play a little clip here. This whole video is really interesting. I would recommend looking it up. Darts and Letters, I just found them the other day. They do a whole 6-part series on this technocracy subject. But this kind of gives you an idea of how they plan to handle economics.
And the way that he measured progress was through energy. That's what he based his entire political theory on. It was literally an energy theory of politics. And it asked a simple question. Could humans produce more energy than they consumed? Scott said that for the vast majority of our history, we couldn't. But now, we were getting there.
Remember that we stated years ago that when the producing mechanism in the United States, on or before the consumption of extraneous energy, reached 200,000 kilogram calories per capita per day, that when it reached that, the majority of healthy, able-bodied citizens would no longer be required to produce and distribute the physical wealth of this continent.
Yet,
and so what he ends up proposing is basically this is the guy here, Howard Scott. He ends up proposing, this is like around the 30s, doing away with the entire financial system altogether and instead introducing an energy-based credit system. And I don't know how logistically they were going to manage this with all the paperwork and filing cabinets, but everyone would be issued a card that was basically like a social security card. It was linked to your identity, and it had your basically your energy credits, and you would basically use that to make all your purchases and all that. So they were considering energy in terms of watts, energy in terms of calories, energy in terms of gas, and they had a very utopian vision of how they would manage society. So you would only join the workforce when you were 25 years old. You would retire when you're 45. You would only have to work something like 16 hours a week. And they had all these shifts rotated for every major job to where you would basically work like 4 hours a day. Then right when you leave, someone else comes in and you would get 78 hours of vacation time a year. So it sounds like a pretty good deal, but it comes at a cost. You essentially have no say in politics. There's really no voting. It's a meritocracy where you prove yourself through your intellectual prowess. And if you're an engineer, if you're intelligent, then you have more and more of a say in how society is governed. And it doesn't sound like such a bad idea, but even then, they were fringing on basically a surveillance state where everything you say and do is monitored. And there is a question that comes up, and I'm not going to make any statements on like whether Elon is going in this direction, but there's a paranoia about him acquiring Twitter, and if he's taking it in that direction of basically having control over the media. Now, with that said, I can say Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook basically kind of did the same thing. You know, he created a platform where everyone has an identity. All your information is out there and you're tracked. And I'll end up in a minute here getting into a belief system that all the tech giants in Silicon Valley are obsessed with. And it's called the Dark Enlightenment. It's a little teaser, but I want to get into Elon's...
Alienism.
That's another hot angle you can hit.
Did you timestamp that BitChute video or no?
No, I didn't.
I got some tie-ins for you at the end.
Nice. All right. So I'll get through this, and then if you want to share some little bits from that, I'm really curious how you're able to tie that in here. I already have a feeling where you're going to go with the Antarctic Germans and the transhumanism angle. That's really interesting. So Elon's grandpa was actually a very interesting figure, as were a lot of these larger-than-life figures in the early 1900s. Joshua Norman Haldeman, he was an American-born Canadian South African chiropractor, aviator, and politician. He became involved in Canadian politics backing the Technocracy movement before moving to South Africa in 1950. Over the course of decades, he repeatedly expressed racist, anti-Semitic, and anti-democratic views. In South Africa, he was a supporter of apartheid and promoted a number of conspiracy theories. A pilot since 1948, he died in a plane crash in 1974. Haldeman is the maternal grandfather of businessman Elon Musk. And I'll skip down to the end here. He ends up moving to Canada, and it was actually because of him that the technocracy movement remained alive and thriving in Canada, whereas it dwindled to non-existence in the rest of the country. In the rest of North America. And sure enough, he was controversial. He was kind of like Henry Ford, publishing a bunch of copies of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, getting all on board with that, bordering on pro-Nazi sympathy and all that. And here at the end here, Haldeman married Eve Peters in 1927. Their first child, Joshua Haldeman, was born in 1934. Blah, blah, blah. Through his daughter, May, his grandson is billionaire businessman Elon Musk. Haldeman's technocratic ideas have allegedly influenced Elon Musk's views. To facilitate travel between his home and practice in Regina and his various other commitments, including the ICA in Davenport, Iowa, Haldeman took flying lessons, earning his pilot's license in 1948 and buying a single-engine plane. He and his second wife became known as flying enthusiasts, toured North America, and in the mid-1950s co-wrote a book titled The Flying Haldemans, Pity the Poor Private Pilots. The Haldemans continued to fly extensively after moving to South Africa. In 1954, they flew some 30,000 miles to Australia and back via Asia, possibly the longest journey by a private pilot in a single-engine plane. beginning in 1953, they also undertook a dozen expeditions in search of the lost city of Halari. Haldeman co-founded the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of South Africa and served as a representative on the Civil Aviation Advisory Council and the Air Navigation Regulations Committee of South Africa.
He's AG Plant.
In 1956, he also tied for first place in the third edition of the Trans-Africa Algiers Cape Town Rally, driving a Ford ranch wagon 5.4 liters. On January 13th, 1974, he and a passenger were killed when his plane's wheels caught in a power line during a practice landing in his plane. I thought that was an interesting tidbit of information there. He was in search of a lost city, which he never found. Pretty eccentric character there.
So this is the Technocracy frontman?
Yes. And so Technocracy, I would totally recommend looking into it. It's a very fascinating movement. And you'll start to see here how it has roots in the modern day current events. So this was a little clip of this guy, Steve Bannon, who was actually, he was like, I suppose, a head advisor for Trump in his previous administration. And now he's a very vocal skeptic of Elon Musk. And he's kind of doing everything he can to tear down this guy, which I'm still going to leave it open. Whether Elon is to be trusted or not, we're going to have to find that out. He's proposing a lot of fascinating things. Just hearing him in his recent Joe Rogan interview, I can agree with a lot of the stuff he's saying. I mean, he seems like a relatable guy, but at the same time, what is he not telling us? But here's what Steve Bannon, here's how Steve Bannon feels about Elon Musk.
Now, here's the point. In techno-feudalism,
Wait,
you're just a digital serf.
New York Times podcast?
Yeah, you think that's going to get cut out?
We'll cut it out.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
Your value as a human being, as someone built and made in the image and likeness of God and endowed with the life spirit of the Holy Spirit, is not, they don't consider that. Everything's digital to them. They are, at the end of the day, transhumanist. And what is transhumanist? Transhumanist is somebody who sees Homo sapien here and Homo sapien plus, right? Plus on the other side, what they call the singularity. And that's why they're all rushing, whether it's artificial intelligence, regenerative robotics, quantum computing, advanced chip design, CRISPR, biotech, all of it to come to this point of which the oligarchs are going to lead that revolution. And why are they going to do it? Number one, when you get to know them and see where they're spending the money, it's because they want eternal life. You know why? Because they're complete atheistic 11-year-old boys.
So that he's touching on this idea of techno-feudalism, and I got to get into that for that to make sense. So techno-feudalism has actually become a very prominent belief system in the modern day, thanks to a guy named Curtis Yarvin. He goes by the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug, and he kind of collaborated and built off the ideas of this philosopher Nick Land, who wrote a book called The Dark Enlightenment. And so the play on words here is that after the Dark Ages, you have the Enlightenment. And what they propose is the Enlightenment was actually the new Dark Ages, because it was the ushering in of democracy, which they view as the mediocratization of society, because the majority is not always right. And they bring up a lot of compelling points here.
The majority is usually stupid.
It's mob mentality. I can't argue with that. They basically propose a monarchy, and this monarchy is actually Curtis Yarvin, he has a letter here called The Butterfly Revolution, where he kind of goes into this in the modern day, but this monarchy is basically his analogy is that the ideal system of government would be a monarchy with feudal city-states, but in the modern day, the conditions are just right for it, because the monarch is actually the CEO of a corporation, and the city-state is that corporation. And you don't have the government bureaucracy, which just slows down the process of corporations following their profit motive, financial incentive to get shit done. So interestingly enough, in his essay here, which I won't read from it, you can check it out if you're interested, but The Butterfly Revolution, this was during Trump's previous, around Trump's previous time in office, he basically lays out a plan which seems to be kind of being followed. He brings up something he calls RAGE, which was retire all government employees, and that shares a eerie parallel to DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, where they're doing just that, basically retiring all government employees. And the idea is dwindle down the government to a point where you can actually take it over in a point of no return with corporate interests, and it's a corporate libertarianism. And the idea of libertarianism appealed to me for a while because I've always been skeptical about government. I feel like we can do things better as a people, but I had never possibly imagined it in a way like this, where you have a corporation basically ruling the world, especially tech corporations that would lay out a future similar to every cyberpunk dystopian film we've ever seen. So this article kind of brings up that a lot of these tech giants, like
saw USAID in there.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of them are getting money from USAID. I mean,
Yeah,
this is like a intelligence community's wet dream. All these apps and data collected on everybody at all times. Of course, the intelligence agencies are going to want to be behind this too.
Oh, I bet. And so many of these folks, like Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen. Mark Andreessen here. I'll look up a photo of this guy. He is a real life conehead.
I think I saw him in the Jake Barber video.
Yeah, he was being carried by that helicopter there.
Mm-hmm.
He is the co-author of Mosaic, the first widely used web browser and graphical user interface, the founder of Netscape, and co-founder of and general partner of Silicon Valley venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. So he's played a vital role in the formation of Silicon Valley, as well as a lot of these other big tech gurus, including Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all these folks. They're really into this philosophy of this Curtis Yarvin guy, and you can find plenty of interviews with him. I won't play clips from it just to save time, but he has a lot of controversial philosophies. He's one of those guys that likes to be an asshole and he likes to offend people. So he'll talk about race, stuff like that, in a way that's kind of just to offend people. So in that sense, he kind of acts like a clown. But this ideology is very real. And it's actually gaining a surprising amount of traction in Silicon Valley. And it's this idea that, technocracy, these tech engineers are better suited to govern society than the average person. I'll pull a few quotes here from this book, Dark Enlightenment, so you can kind of see what it's about here. Here he says, Moldbug's formative influences are Austro-libertarian, but that's all over, as he explains. Libertarians cannot present a realistic picture of a world in which their battle gets won and stays won. They wind up looking for ways to push a world in which the state's natural downhill path is to grow, back up the hill. This prospect is Sisyphean, and it's understandable why it attracts so few supporters. His awakening into neo-reaction comes from the Hobbesian recognition that sovereignty cannot be eliminated, caged, or controlled. Anarcho-capitalism utopias can never condense out of science fiction. Divided powers flow back together like a shattered Terminator, and constitutions have exactly as much real authority as a sovereign interpretive power allows them to have. The state isn't going anywhere because, to those who run it, it's worth far too much to give up. And as the concentrated instantiation of sovereignty in society, nobody can make it do anything. If the state cannot be eliminated, Moldbug argues, at least it can be cured of democracy, or systematic and degenerative bad government, and the way to do that is to formalize it. This is an approach he calls neo-cameralism. To a neo-cameralist, a state is a business which owns a country. A state should be managed, like any other large business, by dividing logical ownership into negotiable shares, each of which yields a precise fraction of the state's profit. A well-run state is very profitable. Each share has one vote, and the shareholders elect a board which hires and fires managers. He goes on to say, so he talks about this concept he calls the cathedral. And the cathedral, in his terms, is this blob of all the major institutions and the media. And it runs just like a cathedral with a pope, in that it creates this almost religion that people, this doctrine that people fall into, and it sets the narrative. And so that was another one of his main skepticisms of democracy. And he pulls a few quotes here. He says, "The cathedral has substituted its gospel for everything we ever knew. Consider just the concerns expressed by America's founding fathers. A democracy is nothing more than the mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49%, Thomas Jefferson. Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote, Benjamin Franklin. Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide, John Adams. Democracies have never been spectacles of turbulence and contention, and have never been found incompatible, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their death, James Madison. We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy. It has been observed that a pure democracy, if it were practicable, would be the most perfect government. Experience has proved that no position is more false than this. The ancient democracies in which the people themselves deliberated never possessed one good feature of government. Their very character was tyranny, Alexander Hamilton." And so he goes on to argue that the word democracy...
We're a republic, not a democracy.
That's right. And he goes on to argue that the word democracy never showed up in the documents of the Founding Fathers. It's been this whole conspiracy, so they say, to make the world more democratic in this kind of globalist structure. So now you're starting to see this other faction here. You got the globalists, and then you got these nationalists that are kind of anti-democracy, but they view that as a good thing. Now, sure enough, because I'll pull up a Urantia book quote so we can kind of compare what does this cosmic philosophy have to say about this. And it lines up in some ways, but there's a really important catch here. So it says in paper 71, Development of the State, the evolution of representative government, just the first part here, it says, democracy, while an ideal, is a product of civilization, not of evolution. Go slowly, select carefully, for the dangers of democracy are 1. Glorification of mediocrity. 2. Choice of base and ignorant rulers. 3. Failure to recognize the basic facts of social evolution. 4. Danger of universal suffrage in the hands of uneducated and indolent majorities. And 5. Slavery to public opinion. The majority is not always right. And so this book
Great quote pool. Great quote pool.
Thanks. It brings up a good point here, but there's something I want to stress here. One, the Urantia book emphasizes the importance of going slowly. And it says this time and time again throughout the book. Whenever you radically try to change the structure of civilization, it collapses. And that was the cause of the fall of the Roman Empire. And there's another important aspect I want to touch on here, which is the atheism that's rampant in Silicon Valley. It's a atheist transhumanism, and that's why they want to extend their lives. You got a lot of these wildly successful and wealthy businessmen that are doing all these weird things like taking baths and lotion and all that to try to preserve their life. They're very serious about it. But I feel like
taking baths and lotion.
Yeah.
You could have gone with drinking baby blood or something, but
we won't get into that. But that could be happening as well. But I forget his name, but I saw a little bit about this one CEO that was doing he was going to great measures, and he looked a lot younger than his age. And it's because he wanted to try to cheat death and upload his brain to a computer so he could live forever. Now, I feel like this system they're laying out of technocracy sounds like it could work, but only if it's following the government of God. I think the only government that works is the government of God. And when I say that, I'm talking about the celestial hierarchy. I'm talking about God's will, infinite intelligence. As long as we're divorced from that, human beings are always going to be fallible. We're always going to make mistakes, and we're always going to be power hungry, you know? So I'm skeptical about this concept of an absolute monarchy of a CEO because, you know, absolute power absolutely corrupts. Unless we can have it, it doesn't matter what kind of system we have. We could live under communism, we could live under a monarchy, we could live in anarchy. It would work if we are all spiritually progressive and we can coexist as intelligent and self-sustaining mortals who can pull our own weight in society. As long as we're relying on any kind of system to take care of us, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, that's amen. Straight up. If there can't be a government without God, without God at its nucleus, period. And that's what kind of scares me with a lot of the transhumanist, technocratic movement and a lot of other movements you see going through mainstream society today, pretty much declaring the fact that the universe is wrong and I'm smarter than the universe, you know? God is bad or God is wrong, I could have done it better, or there is no God, therefore I can do whatever I want to my body, such as, you know, implant chips, turn to the Borg, slice off parts of my body, take different chemicals. There's a bunch of different things that people are willing to do, like hack themselves because of this atheistic perspective. And we know that that comes from the Lucifer rebellion and celestial beings denying the fact of the cosmic government. And when you deny God and think that the universe is just energies, that can lead to some distorted ways of thinking. So any type of government that is divorced from God will be a distortion, like you said, beautifully said. But we need this government of God, the brotherhood of man, the Legacy Foundation for Human Progress, planetary headquarters. We need mind, body, spirit development all across the planet. If it's divorced from God, then it'll become bastardized and it'll become degenerate. So I like how you're putting that. But let's also remember that we're in real time and that there's governments and that the world's a state and there's different factions fighting over power. Just like at the end of my segment with Klaus Schwab and the WEF implanting people into different parts of the government and the corporations. If these Antarctic Nazis are existence and if they're in contact with another off-world species, I mean, look at Maria Orsic. She said she was getting technical schematics beamed into her mind from a different celestial personality, from a celestial race. Does that sound rebellious or does it sound positive to you, you know? So what is the agenda behind the ET groups that are in contact with the Antarctic Germans?
Interesting. You know? That's a good point.
Could they be rebellious and negative in order to push this technocratic, transhumanistic ideology to control the Earth because they don't want Earth to reintegrate with the Galactic Federation?
Now, on that note, I'm about to bring it back to Elon Musk, and I feel like you can run with that and take that in a whole wild new direction. First, one more thing
Neuralink.
Yes, and that is the ultimate question we're going to have to answer, because in our lifetimes, we are about to face the challenge of becoming Luddites because we haven't got Neuralink yet, you know? All our friends, everyone at work is going to have Neuralink. They're going to be just like everyone needs a smartphone now. Everyone's going to need Neuralink. We
sell your
can't,
soul to be cool. Wow.
we can't keep up. It's like all our buddies are doing crazy algorithmic calculations in their heads and who knows what. And here we are, these regular human beings, like, yeah, pro human body. And we're going to
show up on the mansion worlds like this. Oh, fucking crazy.
So the question I want y'all to keep in the back of your minds, I don't have a good answer for it yet, is what are the spiritual implications of the augmentation of the human brain? Because does that even mess with your spirit? Is this normal practice on an advanced world in an era of light and life? And what is the spiritual status of Elon Musk? I looked it up. He claims he's a Christian.
You looked it up? You looked up the spiritual? You just looked it up real quick?
He says he's a Christian, which initially gave me a sigh of relief. I'm like, well, at least he's not an atheist, you know, a pronounced atheist, because I read through the Dark Enlightenment. It's got like 3 chapters and then like 5 chapter 4s, like 4A, 4B. I didn't get to the chapter 4s yet, but already He's bringing up a lot of good ideas, but it is riddled with praise for atheism. He praises Richard Dawkins, and he talks about how their view of God is, God is a mechanism of the human mind, and it's just used to control people. So they view religion as bad. It's just a means of control. There is no God, nothing like that. And now, so as I've been
familiar,
yeah, and Lucifer Rebellion,
yeah.
As I've been looking into this technocracy, my mind kind of harkened back to a guy I was infatuated with several years ago, Jacques Fresco, and I realized, oh shit, this guy's he's a technocrat. And I looked it up. Sure enough, he was. He was alive during that time period. He actually passed away a handful of years ago at a very old age. He lived a good while, but I think he lived to 100. But he created these little replicas you see here on a table. He was extremely enthusiastic about building the world of the future. And what he imagined was a resource-based economy, which really works. And interestingly, I see a lot of people on the left, a lot of the people who advocate the resource-based economy are a little more left-leaning. But ultimately, it's kind of anarchy, which I can really kind of vibe with the idea of like organized anarchy if it's with intelligent, informed citizens who are spiritually minded. You never hear the spiritual angle get brought up. But
Never, dude.
This guy, Jacques Fresco, he imagined a futuristic utopia, these planned circular cities. All the buildings are prefabricated.
Looks a lot like the thumbnail.
Yeah, that's where I got it from. That was an image of his resource-based economy. And his ideas are amazing. I would recommend checking out the documentary, The Choice is Ours. Sure enough, there's a part in there you'll hear him talking about the problems of religion and all that. All these technocrats seem to be atheists. They seem to fall all across the political spectrum, left and right and everywhere in between. And they've splintered into various groups because of that. But they all hold this value of engineers running society. He has a lot of brilliant ideas of prefabricating skyscrapers and all this. And in an eco-village kind of setting where you're surrounded by nature, you can see an alligator next to your house and you just got to deal with it because we should be integrated with nature. It all sounds like it really works. And I would love to see this, honestly.
It's
like
beautiful.
This is like straight out of the Urantia book, It's like Gary Tong's paintings of the civilizations in an era of light and life. I would love to see that. I was doubtful I would ever see it in my lifetime. I would only ever see New World Order, urban sprawl, but something like this really works. But how are we going to get there? Are we going to have to move too radically fast? And are we going to get a different kind of New World Order in the process? So I'll jump back here to some little quotes about Elon Musk. Actually, just this one. I was going to show this. This is just a short little clip.
That's fresh as fuck, dog.
Yeah,
Legacy
this
headquarters.
is that's what it's going to look like, legit. I'm going to build it myself out of aircrete. This is Jacques Fresco talking about his visions of the future.
There's no such thing as a fixed home that a person lives in all their lives. It changes with their values, with their outlook, with their acquired knowledge.
You had said one thing about how the buildings were designed according to function.
Yes.
The curvature and the materials and these...
Yes. I compare it to natural physiology. An animal's shape is not designed from the outside in. It evolves from the inside out.
Wow.
Whatever you request, the exterior will express a cover over the shape that you prefer to live in.
That's cool, dude.
Some of the buildings that are dome-shaped can be laid like eggs continuously by a machine that carries a dome shape, and in that dome, the exterior and the interior fabricated at the same time.
This guy's brilliant, I'm telling you.
Jeez.
There's one single video that's responsible.
Ads.
There's an ad. Well, that was a good stopping point there because
those are beautiful, dude. I could like get lost in his artwork for days, man. Just paint me like one of your French girls, put my feet up and skinny cigarette and just enjoy that artwork.
I feel like it's interesting as concept art. However, I do, as a technical person, I lean more towards like what exactly is the real implementation here? Because it's artsy to say like let's make the design more like an inside out than an outside in, where it's like, well, the technical problem that you're solving is more of like the hard, like abstract to me, because you know, if you read a paper on like what exactly you're accomplishing with this setup versus just something that looks cool with nature, you know, it's sort of that's what I'm a little more curious about. So I think that most of this idea is like has yet to be like fully implemented. I know there's a lot of modern projects that people are actually building that are like implementing the concepts. But I definitely wonder, like, how do we bridge the gap from the artistic idea of these future cities to the actual implementation and what it's providing us, I guess, with the nature connection or you know, the farming and stuff. And so yeah, I'm curious, and so I have some insights from my segment coming up on how they integrate this in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And you're talking about like synthesizing left brain and right brain type of thinking, you know?
That's
like,
right.
Like what is the most functional? What makes the most sense? You know, it's going to be clunky and square, and that's usually we're like, yep, that's it. But can we do that and also make it aesthetically pleasing? You know, I feel like that'll be the future, as opposed to like it's just functionality. We want functionality and aesthetics at the same time.
So I'm blanking on the name here, but there's actually a brilliant startup in Silicon Valley that proposes using tunnels to transport groceries and goods and manufactured goods directly from the manufacturer to your home, and you would have an appliance.
Amazing.
Yeah, you would have an appliance in your
yeah.
kitchen, like right next to your dishwasher. That would be like a hatch you open up, and there's a tunnel that goes down underground. Connected with all these railways with these robotic little transports that carry groceries. So let's say you order some groceries from Walmart. It can all be picked by robots or even employees, loaded into a cart, sent to your address. You can have heating and cooling in some of these carts so you get your fresh Taco Bell delivered to you, you know. And it just comes right up. And this would slash the need for semi-trucks. Apparently, so much of the waste, and of course they talk about carbon emissions and all that, happens in the last step of delivery when you're shipping goods, let's say from China. It's really efficient to ship it over shipping containers, but right when it hits our country, it's got to go down.
The gas and the
loaded onto a truck. That's
trucks.
Right. And even that is more efficient, but once it gets into your local area to like a fulfillment center, and you got to deal with all the extra traffic and congestion, there's a lot of inefficiency there.
Forklifts.
So, that's right. And Taylor, with what you're saying, I could picture a lot of problems being caused with logistics of like warehouses. They got to be squares for all the shelving and the boxes, you know? So this would take a lot of radical changes happening really fast. I could only see something like this being rolled out over like 1,000-year plan, you know? We need to be very forward thinking about this.
Yeah, the Legacy City will have that built into it. So in the future, when you guys see that popping, we'll be at a house for you. That's funny. The first time I heard of Star Trek in my life was from my aunt when I was young, and it happened directly after this thought. I thought of a tube system that went underground. I'm sure you guys thought of this when you were young too. That like anything you needed would just come from that tube, and like you have like a fireplace, but like it's in like your kitchen or living room, and it's not a fireplace. It's just like a little shelf, but it connects to the underground tube system, and whatever you need, food, TV, skateboard, shoes, whatever, all the corporations like fed into that conveyor belt system, and you just press pay, and then it appears in the next 20-30 minutes in that little section in your house. And I was like, that'd be the future. Oh yeah, I was really young, and I told my aunt that, and she goes, oh, it sounds like the Star Trek fucking damn it, they have a word for it, the replicator, the Star Trek replicator.
I was gonna say, you're the Star Trek fan.
Yeah, they just walk up and say like tea, Earl Grey, like Picard, and it appears right there. And I actually felt stupid because like I was like, oh, she just shit on my idea. I thought that was a good idea. But now looking back on it, you know, the replicator is way different than the underground tunnel system.
Dude,
yeah, I was young.
You're an engineer. You'd make a good technocrat.
Oh God, no, I wouldn't, because I'd go to war with them.
Yeah, well, and so that's I think the idea that a lot of these technocrats have is that we almost need a hard reset. And I don't think that plays into the Great Reset idea, not to my knowledge, but it's this idea that you kind of need to start fresh and build something new from the ground up, because we're carrying with us a lot of baggage from the last 2,000 years in our convention. And they see, rather than the slow march of progress the Urantia book talks about, they see just all these inefficiencies we've carried with us. And now that we're at this point in history where we know what we know, we're at a point where we can start fresh. Maybe that's why Elon wants to build a colony on Mars, so he has an opportunity to start fresh and roll out a new pattern like system from Mars to the rest of Earth. I don't know, but jumping into Elon and Mars, I'll play another little clip here. This is Whitney Webb. This interview and really anything by Whitney Webb is really cool from what I've seen. She's got her own website.
Yeah, she's a beast, dude.
Yeah, man, I couldn't keep up with her intellectually. I want to know everything she knows, I want to absorb her brain because she's able to spit off so many names and dates and information right off the top of her head. But here she's pressured. PBD likes to do this with his guests where he kind of pressures them with questions to really put them on the spot. And he's asking her about the connection with Trump and Elon Musk. And he talks about why are they trying to take out Trump so much? But here's her thoughts on just Elon Musk as a person. I'll turn this up.
Thing just takes off 42 million views on this tweet, so everybody's responding. I can't believe you said this. He's trying to do this. The reality is Magneto was also a guy that dealt with the Holocaust, and the story is a survivor of it, and that's kind of what he's going through. So it's really a cause behind it. Anyways, so my concern becomes when somebody that's been, here's what I'm for this, I'm for that, I'm for this, we got to get off of advertisers, we got to be doing all subscription. All of a sudden, you bring in an advertising agency, a veteran in the marketplace to go and get advertisers, and she's a BlackRock, edifying Larry Fink, edifying fake news is not real.
Yeah.
Did something happen? Did they find, or that's the part that kind of throws me off sometimes.
Well, I think some of these, I see Elon Musk as a person who has like a very specific persona he wants to project to the public, and then there's business Musk, right? And I don't think they're necessarily always the same person. So, for example, Elon Musk, a lot of people maybe forget, he's a big military contractor. And also, the Space Force, that's also an intelligence agency. So he's technically a military and intelligence contractor. In order to keep your contracting business with those things, there's certain rules you have to play by, and certain things I would assume you can and can't say, or you'll lose those lucrative contracts. And if you look at someone like Elon Musk and his business history, a lot of his companies would not have been successful, would not have been successful without significant subsidies from the government. So, I feel like in order to get those deals, there's certain rules you have to abide by to an extent, at least when it comes to your business decisions and certain things, right? So maybe he wants to project, this persona of like, I'm one of the bros, I'm one of the guys, I believe in free speech and all of this. And certainly when he bought Twitter, that's what he said, but then it became, oh yeah, free speech, but not freedom of reach. And now it's sort of changing again with the appointment of this new CEO. And again, I don't really have any high hopes, and I didn't necessarily when Musk bought Twitter, just because I tend to be kind of skeptical. And I guess you
World Economic Forum, look at the page. World Economic Forum.
Yeah, and I'll stop it there. I got one more
Linda Yaccarino from the World Economic Forum, who Musk placed as the CEO for Twitter. Antarctic Germans. Placing people, dog.
It's
young global leaders.
Yeah, I got, and on that note, I got something I know you're gonna riff off of here. This answers a question. What happened? This answers a question that was posed in our previous episode as to where did Elon get his name? And this is actually an interview with his father. He's talking about the names of his different children and how he came to those ideas. Whoops.
Yeah, so we go back to my children's names. Elon, when I was a child, we used to build rockets, and we used to read the books of Herman Oberth, Professor Herman Oberth, and Werner von Braun, and they had these illustrations.
Oh my God, dude! Jesus.
They were books, but they had illustrations, and they were in German, unfortunately. But the adult at that time that we were with, he would tell us what the stories were saying about going to planets and all that sort of stuff, and we could see the illustrations and everything. And Werner von Braun's book, I think it was his, or it could have been Ober's book, spoke about that the head of the Mars colony would be called the Elon. Now, I remember that, but I never thought of it as a name. I never thought it was a person's name. And then when May and I got married, I was quite amazed to discover that her father's grandfather or something had been called Elon Haldeman, which was really reminded me of the stories that we had. And so I thought, well, yes, I'd like that name for Elon because it means something to me, Elon.
So that makes sense. That kind of synthesized both of your viewpoints, Deadrick and Taylor, because Taylor, you're saying it was probably a little more natural, maybe. And sure enough, it was his wife's grandfather's name was Elon. So it was very natural, but it was also inspired by Werner von Braun. So that's fascinating, and I'll end my stream there. So that's very thought provoking. What are we to make of all this? What is the coincidence that sure enough Elon would grow up to be the richest man in the world, this very influential and brilliant public figure that's taken us to Mars? It just so happens to synchronize with the Nazi rocket scientist Werner von Braun's prediction that Elon would be the head of Mars. And the other big question is, what are we to make of transhumanism? And is that a bad thing? I mean, my gut instinct tells me I don't feel good about it. And I know, like, we don't feel good about any new technology that comes out. I'm sure on highly advanced worlds, everyone's augmented in some way. And while technocrats have generally taken the eugenics angle, this kind of rules out the need for eugenics, because my belief is that every race is superior in their own way. You know, there's a reason we have different races. As corny as it sounds, God put us here as different colors of the rainbow, and we each have a different tone and a different quality to us. So what is superior?
Oh, that's so cute.
So what is superior to the white man when he's looking at the other races and they're not meeting his standards of superiority? Well, the white man isn't meeting the standards of superiority to the black man, and the Asians have their own standards of superiority, and so do the Native Americans and the Polynesians. And so, like, how do you live your life? What are your values? And it's as we come together as a human race while maintaining our integrity, not some monoculture, but maintaining our cultural integrity, we all have something to learn from each other, and that's absolutely vital. So when all's said and done, it's still really difficult to say, like, can we trust Elon Musk? Because we saw, like, his grandfather, he was an avowed technocrat. He was also dabbling in some racist themes and all that. But, like, Elon isn't his grandfather. I mean, how much are you like your grandfather, you know? I know I'm nothing like my grandpa. And so it's kind of a reach to say, you know, Elon's going to be just like his grandpa. So my thoughts are kind of up in the air at this point. I really don't know what to make of them. I'm still highly skeptical about the direction things are going in. And this new reactionary movement, as it's called, look into it because it's real and it's gaining real traction in this new administration. And the establishment is doing everything they can to take it out. And I don't know if it's one corrupt system just being replaced with another, or if this is actually the dismantling of a crooked system for something better. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking exactly about that PBD podcast that you just kind of showed those clips from Whitney Webb. She's a killer. Yeah. She knows a lot about the Musk. In that same interview, they start talking about people wanting to create the everything app, you know, everything you need to do, like
that's right.
Driver's license, social media, everything, paying for bills, everything you need to do through one app, and that'd be the intelligent agency's fucking wet dream because they have all of your information in one convenient table that they could look up on everybody. So like social credit system. going back to what you're talking about with the leader or the creator, frontman of Technocracy, his point of view, the energy social credit system. And this will be implemented in the years coming. You'll see it. Back then, they didn't have digital tracking, so they actually like printed out certificates, and you'd have to mail certificates in order to do things. And it wasn't really real-time tracking, so it didn't catch on. But fast forward to the digital age, and you can track people in real time just with presses of buttons. And it's kind of like you're attaching yourself to a digital tracking system so that the Technocracy, the cabal, the Antarctic Germans are able to figure out exactly where you are at all times. I'm going to share my screen for a video that actually you sent me. I'm surprised you didn't timestamp this, but I got some timestamps for you.
I wasn't even going to bring up the Raelians because I couldn't think of a decent connection other than the fact that they have similar viewpoints of transhumanism and all this, but I couldn't make that connection in my mind, but I knew you'd be able to run with this.
Well, yeah, this is from November 26, 2022. Elon Musk tweets, slides from my Twitter company talk. So check this out.
How could it possibly be revenue for a person? I want to remind you of this creepy patent that was filed a couple of years ago, and it's actually patent 666. Cryptocurrency system using body activity data. This was filed by Microsoft, so it's not some whack job, small company hoping to get in on the Great Reset. This is Microsoft. And look what it says. Human body activity associated with a task provided to a user may be used in mining process of a cryptocurrency system. You can read all of this, but it says, for example, a brainwave or body heat emitted from the user when the user performs a task provided by an information or service provider, such as viewing an advertisement or using certain internet services, can be used in the mining process. So that's how advertising as entertainment will tie into the Internet of Bodies and his proposed Twitter payments system. Also, they're going to do identity verification. That's what blue verified means on Twitter. This is why he took away the initial verified person system that existed at Twitter, and now he wants a different kind. And you know what they're using for this, to get people to do this, is they're saying trolls and shills are so dangerous. And I agree, bots, like you can use technology to turn out thousands of bots to go like something or share something, and then that thing becomes very popular, and just by sheer force of it being everywhere, other people jump on the bandwagon, right? I agree that is not that's a bad thing. That's one of the things that's ruined our society, in my opinion. So we do need to get a handle on that. But what is going to happen with Twitter verified? How verified will you need to be? Like, will you need to do fingerprint or biometric identification? If so, will that tie to how they're going to use advertising as entertainment and allow you to mine cryptocurrency and earn tiny little bits of payment just for being online? Well, do you remember in the beginning of this with paradism? We won't have to work, there'll just be leisure class of people everywhere, says Rael, the Maitreya from the Raelian movement. And then current day Noah Yuval Harari says that there's not going to be anybody working. What are we going to do with all these people that have been thrown out of work by robots? We'll have to put them on drugs and get them to play video games. Are you seeing how it all ties together?
I remember hearing clips of Yuval saying that.
So that's when it comes down to the deep dystopian technocracy movement is, like you said, there's going to be a technocracy movement that makes it that so that robots and automatic automation systems are taking over the jobs for the working class, but they know that that'll put a lot of people out of jobs. When those people are out of jobs, what are they going to do? Like she said, put them on drugs. A, we see it happening. Oxycontin, Xanax, all that shit. Make them play video games. B, and then with that entertainment system she just portrayed, the scaffolding, it's you'll mine cryptocurrency based off the games you play and the ads that you do. And even on Twitter and X now, there's new games coming out that are like, has something to do with like pop culture. If you answer the correction right, you like somehow mine some type of service or some type of meme coin.
So she was right.
It's showing you that all these dumb people who can't contribute to society, they're going to get you hooked on drugs and hooked on stupid games that help mine digital assets for the elite. Then you become a slave without even knowing it. But that's going back to what you're talking about, the original technocratic person, that Haldeman or whatever that guy. He said, how can we generate more energy than we consume? That's what they're talking about. So all the bottom feeders, that consumers that aren't contributing to society, and they're going to take away just because they're naturally lazy. How can we use them as fucking cattle to mine more digital efficiency for the top? You know, so it's this circuit system of energy influence that the technocrats are trying to push out to society. And it's funny how that patent was number 666, the mark of the beast. You know.
Or it was like 60606, so it's like that's our world, man.
True that. And on top of that, Elon, what did Elon get famous for? PayPal, one of the first digital currencies that you could track people online, you know. And he was crypto before crypto. That's PayPal, tracking your digital purchases. When we want to do the purchases, if I pay in cash, you can't track what I do, you know, and that's one way the government can control you. Oh, we noticed on November 12th that you used your money in a way we didn't like it. Turn off your car. Turn off your new Tesla that has a chip programmed into it that you can no longer drive for 7 days. You know, it's this state technocracy. It's this treating the humans as cattle in order for the elite to freaking become wealthy. I don't have to pull the quote again right now, but I read it every fucking podcast. It's that Jesus quote that he looked down upon people who didn't use defense, didn't use a means of self-protection against this elite few who would manipulate them. So if there's an elite few who are manipulating us using technological means, any kind of means, Jesus said we need to rise up and defend ourselves against this. And it's what's happening right in front of us. I'm going to make that leap and let's assume that the Antarctic government is real, that the Nazi breakaway civilization does exist. And through the WEF, they're implanting people in every government, every corporation. Maybe Elon could be influenced by this group. It sounds like it. And then at the end of my segment, it shows you how the WEF, they decided to speed up the timeline through viruses, through all these different revolutionary movements. So it seems like maybe the Antarctic government and even maybe the cabal, they might be starting to join forces in order to create that one world government, and they're accelerating the timeline to get there. And that's why all these things are being implemented. Chips and brains, social current system. I mean, it all makes sense. Technocracy, his dad's a technocrat, social current system, energy current system, social credit system, and then add that to AI and chips in the brain. That's transhumanism. Before you know it, we get a full-on Borg planet that's in full rebellion, and we're against the universe because we're atheistic, technocratic planet, you know?
Especially because that's where my uncertainty towards integrating with computers and becoming a cyborg lies, is does that affect your spirituality? And I don't know. I can't conceive of how, but like, if we're all living forever here on Earth, I mean, I guess given enough time, we would develop a spiritual culture and eventually ascend, but that's kind of my uncertainty, is would we become trapped here? We couldn't actually ascend from this body, you know, but I can't conceive of that. It's too far in the future. We're just going to have to see how things play out in our lifetime. But my conspiracy brain does wonder if this current system, this current movement happening, this almost cultural revolution that's taking place, is exposing all the deep, dark secrets of the deep state and of stuff like the World Economic Forum and all that. And then people like Elon Musk and Trump are actively exposing a lot of this stuff, as well as the UAP crew. They're exposing all this stuff because the general public sympathizes with it. We're like, yeah, we don't trust the government either. And it could be like my conspiracy brain speculates, what if they're just releasing the secrets everyone already knows, playing off that mistrust of government so they can tear down the government and then just build a different new world order. And it's the same end game, just a different path to get there. You know, it's like a roadblock came up on their first path, so they just divert us to a little back road to get us right back to the same destination. I would like to believe that's not what's happening, and that we actually are moving in a direction where people have better representation. But man, all I can say is we're just going to have to become more self-sustaining as a people. And I know that through the legacy, we're going to coordinate and we're going to make it happen. And it's going to be up to us to remind people what's important.
Oh, yeah. I got actually 2 quick clips, and then let's get to Techo's segment real quick just to wrap it up. Am I sharing my screen right now? Yeah. Cool.
It's called the Internet of Bodies. It's real. And finally, I don't know if people are paying attention to the way his purchase of Twitter is going to allow him to facilitate this whole thing. And kind of how I look at it, it's kind of he would become the king, president, or the Elon of the new society. Because look what he's saying now. He's going to do Twitter 2.0, the everything app.
So yeah, that just led us back into that I played the clips out of order, but
yeah, that's probably the first one you meant to play. But yeah, that's
the Elon, like how he's going to have control over this society. Very interesting. Let's do this. Let's go to 1259 real quick. Let's bring it back to connection with my segment real quick.
All right.
And the leader of the World Economic Forum, the guy that is advised by Noah Harari there and wants us to own nothing and be happy, Klaus Schwab. Here's another swastika coincidence. He was at the APEC summit not long ago, 2 weeks ago, and this is their symbol. Look at it behind him there, the APEC summit. It's
a swastika, straight up.
Almost in a Star of David.
So this symbol appears all over Twitter right now. This symbol gets you banned. How interesting. And look what he says here, by the way.
No.
The winners will take it all in the 4th Industrial Revolution. And that is the Great Reset.
Now,
how sketchy does it get? Klaus Schwab at a huge World Economic Forum meeting, and the symbol is a swastika, and he's talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution, and the winner will take everything.
It's real low key. It's kind of hidden back there, but it looks identical. Now, with that symbol comparison, I don't know if you got a timestamp for this, but were you going to go into the Raelian movement? Because that was their
I don't think
logo.
we got time. Yeah, that was their logo. I don't think we got time.
It's more of a tangent.
Yeah, but that was the second to last clip. Here's the last clip I got right here.
Okay.
That his grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, I think it's his mother's father, was head of the Technocracy movement. Technocracy, this is their symbol, it's called the monad, was really big. It grew so fast. It was this idea that mathematicians and engineers were the perfect people to run governments. All right, I won't get into it.
That's it. Just trying to tie some strings together. So yeah, grandfather, leader of the Technocracy movement in Canada. Elon, trying to put chips in your brain, also heavily funded by U.S. aid and government subsidiaries. And Klaus Schwab, somehow tied into all this with the World Economic Forum and the transhumanism Great Reset, speeding up that timeline, showing Nazi regalia at their WEF summits. And we just watched the video of the Nazi breakaway civilization of the Antarctic Germans making a treaty with the rest of the world to place people and to fucking influence the planet. All right. Tachula has some visions of somebody who saw how to integrate this from the future. So maybe this could possibly be the answer.
One final thought. I'm sorry. One final thought I wanted to mention on what you just showed is that that symbol with the Star of David and the swastika in the middle. That's the logo of the Raelian movement, and basically what they are, it's a goofy UFO cult. They believe that in synthesizing the Nazi and Hebrew ideologies, I suppose, and it's essentially a UFO cult run by like a sex fiend, like any good cult. But they actually gave an award to Elon for his ingenuity as moving.
Oh yeah, the
humanity in the right
Raelians did,
direction.
right?
Yeah, the Raelians.
Yeah, the Raelians gave a high honor to Elon. Yeah.
And that was why a few years ago, Kanye West went crazy and he started saying like, "I'm a Nazi and I love Hitler, and I'm a Jew and I love Jews." And he posted that logo just before Elon banned him from X. And it was one of those things like, why
Elon
did
thought
Elon
he was revealing too
ban
much.
him? Yeah, it's a weird connection there.
Elon was like, "Hey, bro, you can't be saying that shit online, ban."
But I'm sorry to cut you off, Taylor. I just had to add that little fill-in of detail for what that symbol actually represented.
You're good.
Well, to segue in before too, for the people, just to let you know, thank you for tuning in. Hit that like button, get us to the front page. If you're here and you haven't hit that like button, hit that like button. And if you're here and you haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you are up to date with all the celestial broadcasts. And we have shirts. We are selling shirts. We're trying to create a Mind, Body, Spirit app to be in everybody's pocket so that you guys can get tuned in with all the content and you guys can keep up to date with your own Mind, Body, Spirit progress. Shirts, the links are in the description. They're only $30. You look sick. You get to say Legacy Foundation for Human Progress across your chest or across your back. We got different styles and stuff like that. Only $30. We make only a $9 profit. Cost $21 to manufacture them, but with that $9, it'll go to helping other people hit their Mind, Body, Spirit progress. So go check that out. The link is in the description. You pick up a shirt and you're supporting us, taking the planet back from the Antarctic Germans and the cabal. Amen, brother. All right, Tachula, let's tell us how the future looks.
Yeah, so hopefully this kind of bridges the gap. Now, I do have, how are you guys for time? Because I have a feeling this segment could be, at least another 45-minute section. So if y'all are good to strap down, we got some fire quotes and predictions about the decline of the 20th and 21st century from this guy who wrote this in like the 20s or the 30s. So very interesting. Technically, this book was published in maybe like the 70s, but it has a lot of future predictions. So overall, we're trying to bridge this gap between the sort of fear mongering about technocracy, which can overfill our minds and overwhelm us. As people who are worried about the direction our planet is going. And that's valid. But I guess I'm hoping to kind of bring the sort of inspiring angle to this and also remind the people that the evolutionary time-space worlds were not created to be perfect utopia from the start. They were meant for humans and other civilizations to develop the processes and throughout time actually build something that became more and more perfect. So remember that everything we see right now is the slow march of progress. And try not to get too existential and overwhelmed that sometimes progress goes downwards. It seems like it goes downwards for quite some time until we start to rise upwards and it's downwards. However, look at the overall scheme of humanity in that, amidst the downward slopes and the upward rises, there is a trending slope going upwards. Although you could say that it's not guaranteed, if we nuke ourselves, will that stop the upward slant going up? Well, even in a nuclear situation, humans would still survive. So you could argue that even the humans that survive after it gets repopulated, we still continue to go up from there. So obviously, a lot of crazy stuff can happen. We want to do everything we can to avoid that. But what does it take to actually get to the future that we want, the sort of utopia, the Edenic culture,
the era of light and life
of the past. Yeah, the era of light and life. And how do we integrate this? And yeah, so the answer is obviously that we're missing here is the sort of global spiritual component. And in the story I'm going to present to you, it explains that component and how it solves the Orwellian technocratic dystopia. So yeah, to get into this is a book called Chronicles from the Future is the English publication. And what this is the diary of a man named Paul Amadeus Dinac. And this came out, let's see, well, a little summary. So Paul Dinac was a Swiss-Austrian teacher with fragile health. And he was diagnosed with something early on called encephalitis lethargica, or maybe that's the modern term for it. But basically, when he was a teenager, he fell asleep for a week, and the doctors did not know when he was going to wake up. So that happened to him, and once he came out of it, they were like, look, this might happen again sometimes. At least when it does, we know what's going on. And so that did end up happening again in 1921 when he was, I think, in his 20s. And this time he fell asleep for a year, and they kept him alive in a hospital in Zurich. They had to tube feed him. Now, during this time, because he did wake up after he woke up, he claimed to have experienced a phenomenon where his consciousness entered the body of a man named Andreas Northam in the year 3906, where Dinac then lived an entire year of life in that future before he woke back up in Zurich in 1922, I guess that would have been. Now, how did this story get to us? Because he didn't speak about this publicly, but he did write a journal about all of his memories and his experiences. And he ended up entrusting this journal to one of his students. He became a teacher, and he entrusted his journal to his student, George Papachazzi, and instructed George to use this as practice for translating from German to Greek, because he wrote the manuscript in German. And so later on, his student, George, realized that this was not just any normal diary. It was actually his teacher describing this phenomenal event that happened to him, of him living in the future. And that was pretty interesting for George. And later on, he became a Freemason, and the Freemasons allegedly took this book very seriously, or did not believe that this should be put out for the general public. But George Papachazzi believed, I guess, in his teacher, and that this message was for universal insights for all of mankind. So he ended up publishing the book. And so there's a large book in Greek. It's about this thick.
I wonder why it was originally written in German.
Yeah, interestingly enough, this is another German connection. Now, I don't know if the Paul Dinac, he's quite obviously, I think, German. The name Paul Dinac might not even be his original name, because that's the name that George Papachazzi knew him by after he had left Zurich, and I think was maybe in the Greece area, somewhere no longer in Germany. This was, I guess, he's in his 20s in the 1922 era. When was World War I and II? Do you know, Tyler?
I know.
One was like 1914 to 1920, and then World War II was 1939 to 45.
Got it.
46,
and World War II, was that the World War I was the Nazis? Which one was it?
World War II was the Nazi war.
Okay, gotcha. Well, okay, so then you say he wasn't. He was alive during World War I, so he wasn't necessarily associated with the Nazi stuff, because he fell asleep in 1921 in Germany when he had his experience. So that's at least, some sweat off your brow. But yeah, so I'm going to read an interesting quote that kind of hits home the validity of this guy's experience. So let's see. Here we go. My case has nothing to do with inspiration and creation. I was never blessed with such gifts, and you cannot lose what you never had. My case is that of a traveler who never spoke about his adventures and who has finally decided to break his silence. I have no friends. My mother is dead. I'm completely alone in the world. So whoever you are, you who somehow one day will end up with my manuscripts, be my friend and feel me. Do not laugh and do not mock me. I have been tried and tested a great deal in life. Everything you've read, I've seen with my own eyes. I've lived it, I've touched it, I believe and worship it all. So, yeah, I
pretty
hope,
gnarly.
Yeah, I hope as the listener or as the reader of this book, you start to get some of that awe building up, because this is a phenomenal experience. You know, he said he spent a year in the future. His consciousness traveled, not his body. He woke up in the body of someone else in the future, and I'll get into that. And so, yeah, this is a very, very cool case. And again, to me, it's compelling. It actually had a profound change on my sort of spiritual and technological worldview for the way that the world was going, because a lot of, again, it's too easy to hop into like the fear of the worst. But when I read this, I realized that even if it gets as bad as a wide-scale nuclear war, humanity will come out of it and we will get better. However, ideally, because we have this book, that is not our exact timeline. Maybe now we have a chance to sort of take this insight and actually change it. So yeah, I'll get into a couple technical details, primarily being when he woke up in the future, what do you mean? He was in the body of someone else, someone that was named Andreas Northam. That's what they were calling him when he woke up. And when he woke up, he started speaking German, you know, from the 1920s. And this profounded the physicians that were keeping Andreas Northam in hospital, because they recognized that the language was very old German, and they knew that Andreas didn't know this language. So that's one interesting thing. And then another thing is that Andreas Northam's best friend, Stefan, came and sat down with him, and when he said he didn't recognize his the handwriting that was coming from Andreas, which again, this is Paul's consciousness from the 1920s is in this body in 3906. So I've never heard a time travel thing kind of like this, although I think there's a TV show that I watched later on which talks about how consciousness transferring into bodies for time travel rather than the physical body, you know, traveling. And so, okay, here's the conditions of, so Andreas Northam, what happened to him? How could this transfer of consciousness be possible? Well, one, remember, Paul's body fell asleep for a year, and they kept it alive. And so the consciousness is sort of loose, it's kind of free. And then in this future year, what happened to Andreas was that he was in an accident, a life-threatening accident. So I'll read this quote. Jaeger told me that they had brought Northam to Molson, having suffered fatal head injuries in a crash. He died in Molson's arms, and only after 15 minutes, and after having frozen him, did Molson manage to bring him back to life. So what happened to this Andreas character was that he was in an accident with head injuries, and he said that let's see. Oh, he died. So Andreas died in the arms of one of the physicians, Molson. And then Molson used some sort of flash freeze technique to like preserve the body. And then they were able to revive it. Now it was still in a coma, but after they revived it and Andreas woke up, that's when Paul was actually in the body. So what I'm painting here is that Andreas Northam, personality, consciousness, soul, has left the building. However, since the body was preserved with this flash freezing method, there's a sort of, I guess, open possibility or availability. And, I don't know what exactly took Paul's consciousness from the 20th century into this future.
Angels?
Right, angels, or maybe some kind of weird, energetic Earth portal. Maybe it's the location of Andreas. And, who knows? There's so much ways to speculate, but
quantum glitch
in the Matrix. Sure. Yeah. So that's the story. That's how he got to 3906. Now that alone, okay, pretty cool as a sci-fi story. Why do I think it's real? Because I'm judging it based on the content of what he describes that he learned in the future. And so now we'll get into the first kind of clip I got for you, because again, this was written, he originally wrote this German manuscript, between 1920 and probably 1930, which is after he woke back up. The original Greek didn't get published. He had kept the manuscript of his diary, and then he eventually became a teacher, passed on the diary. It got translated to Greek before it eventually got published in probably like the 60s or 70s. I have to double check the date on that. So, quite a bit of years, but still, even this being published in Greek in like the 60s or 70s, this is how it describes the decline of the 20th and 21st centuries. So tell me if you do not think this is accurate. And now I'll share my screen for you guys here.
Thank you.
Okay.
The decline of the 20th and 21st centuries was marked by materialism, overpopulation, and the erosion of spiritual and moral values. European civilization lost its dominance, not only politically and militarily, but also culturally. Society became obsessed with material comforts, consumerism, and the blind admiration of technology, leading to a lack of inner cultivation and emotional depth. Art became abstract and incoherent, and architecture turned into monotonous cubic designs which were passively accepted by the public. The pursuit of wealth and practicality overshadowed sensitivity and idealism. Education shifted away from classical knowledge toward technical training. Over time, a spiritual emptiness developed, causing disillusionment and a lack of rebellion against oppressive structures. Western values spread worldwide, eroding unique national identities. American influence grew rapidly, shaping global culture, but without the historical depth or experience to manage it wisely. The world became increasingly nihilistic, prioritizing self-interest and competition over compassion and solidarity. As technological progress became an end in itself, rather than a means for human betterment, people found themselves in a new Middle Ages, unaware of the loss of their deeper spiritual and intellectual life. Democracies gave way to competing autocracies, and society fixated on whether totalitarian regimes should be left or right-wing, leading to countless conflicts. Eventually, overpopulation became an uncontrollable crisis, causing widespread famine, economic collapse, and social unrest. Birth control policies were introduced too late, and basic human rights and freedoms deteriorated as survival took precedence. The loss of faith and ideals created a void that science alone could not fill. Many physicists dismissed spirituality, claiming scientific knowledge could replace traditional beliefs. However, this only deepened humanity's existential crisis. With life reduced to a meaningless sequence of events, severe psychological disorders, widespread suicides, and an era of nihilism followed. Young people, left without guidance, admired shallow celebrities instead of true role models. Apathy and cynicism prevailed, leading to the fall of moral values and social cohesion. Looking back from the future, this period is seen as a dark age of anarchy, materialism, and chaos. The obsession with economic competition and uncontrolled technological advancement without moral progress is considered the root of the era's suffering. The final collapse of fragmented national systems eventually paved the way for the universal commonwealth, but only after centuries of struggle and devastation.
What do you think of that?
Checks out. That is an accurate portrayal of the end of the 20th century going into the 21st century.
Yeah, right on the money. I wonder, everybody knows that around the 1910s, 1920s, 30s, there was like a big wave of extraterrestrial communication. We conjecture on this channel that it might have to do with something changing in the Lucifer adjudication, the court case, the cosmic court case of Gabriel versus Lucifer, that when forward steps are made, maybe more transmissions can come to more people. And it seems like through 1920, 1930, a lot of people were getting stuff. So if Germany was a hot spot, or where did this guy live? He was what?
Yeah, it was Zurich, near Zurich. So that's near Germany. I think that might be in Germany.
He's getting transmissions as well. The Theosophical Society was getting some interesting tidbits of information. It's almost like if the hotspot shifted to the United States after World War II, or did it? But
this is something I actually want to cover in a separate episode. But there is a rich history in America, as well as many other countries across the world. From the late 1800s throughout the early 1900s, there was an explosion of spiritual movements, like unprecedented. You had all these communities popping up in Germany, throughout Russia, and definitely across the U.S. People were getting very experimental with how they're structuring their communes and stuff, experimenting with different structures of organization and governing. And that's where you get a lot of these weird sex cults and religious offshoots. You get a proliferation of branches off the evolutionary tree of Christianity in all these Christian sects and subcommunities in America at the time. And it seemed to lay the foundation for a greater revelation like the Urantia book in the 30s. It seemed like the time was right. People were hungry for spiritual truth. Then we start moving into the events leading up to World War II, and we start becoming very materialistic and nihilistic as a culture across the world. But that time period was definitely just proliferating with spiritual enlightenment, people channeling, claiming to channel beings and entities and all this kind of stuff, receiving angelic wisdom, miracle healings. This stuff was just rampant around that time. And that's definitely something you don't learn about in school. So we'll have to cover it in an upcoming episode.
Yeah, and it lends more credibility to this transmission right here. Chronicles from the Future, baby.
Francis Bacon's New Atlantis. I gotta check
Yeah, and
that out.
I do. Yeah, you got to wonder if some of the open sort of spiritual transmissions of the 20th century, including the Urantia book in 1955, is it possible that the Seraphic Intelligence Corps saw an opportunity to do a little time travel moment and let Paul Denock,
Maybe.
go and experience the future in that body that had that unique gateway, so that he could bring this message back and have it influence society and change the timeline in a sense.
Perhaps it was some adjuster training for the mortal core of what do you call it? Isn't the mortal core of finality? Core of Agondanters? What was it?
Yeah, mortal core of the finality.
You get like subliminal thought adjuster training. Your thought adjuster will go off and influence your dreams and stuff. And maybe his thought adjuster found a perfect window of opportunity in his sleep stasis to like transport his vision to the future.
Oh, you mean the Reserve Corps of Destiny?
The Reserve Corps of Destiny. That's the word I was looking for. That's right.
And for the record, also, you said 1955, Taylor. For the viewers, the Urantia book actually came, the last 196 papers, the last paper came in 1933, and the first paper came around 1911, and it was held a secret and published in 1955. So transmissions were occurring around the same time. I wonder if this guy was also, because the Urantia book itself states that there is over a score. So that's 20, a little under a score of 20 other people that were getting contacts and transmissions as well. So don't count this out.
I've often thought about this. If the revelators were hoping to prevent something like World War II, I mean, the Nazis had actually engineered their own religion, and it was a materialist religion, riddled with Babylon symbolism and all kinds of creepy stuff. But they were drawing off of a lot of theosophical teachings and stuff, and maybe the revelators saw these concurrent spiritual movements and belief systems starting to solidify, And they're like, we need to hurry up and give these humans the truth before something happens. Sure enough, World War II happens. The Urantia book never gets let out to the public. And a few decades of stagnation go by where the Urantia book's just gathering dust. And thankfully, it was because of the funds of Sir Herbert Wilkins and stuff like that, the book miraculously is able to get published. And of course, at another time, we can speculate if there was human influence in those papers during that period of time. People might have edited some stuff in. I'm not sure, but there's no doubt, hands down, that's a real revelation. There's definitely real revelatory content. But it's a fascinating period of our history, which we'll still be talking about 1,000 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and where are these images from?
This is just
Did they come
AI
with the book, or-
generated. I generated them based on.
You did that?
Nice.
I
The
did.
text in it?
Yeah, I kind of did it. Yeah, I put together these quotes based on some AI summaries of different sections in the book that I wanted to make sure we covered. So yeah, I got a lot more. So let's keep rolling with it. But yeah, so remember this. Okay, and let me remind you, in the future, Paul gets access to the library, and he actually calls them they're like 3D visual environments that also narrate and talk about, what's happening, and you can interact with it. And so he's sort of in this 3D virtual reality watching the histories from, the year 3906 backwards to the 20th and 21st centuries. And yeah, he saw, many things. A skeptic would say, why didn't he write specific predictions so he could prove that he definitely did see the future? Well, I mean, everything we just read was pretty specific, pretty on the money. But I get the idea. So let's jump to. So that was the description of the fall of 20th and 21st century, and at the end there it said that the final collapse of the fragmented national systems eventually paved the way for the universal commonwealth, but only after centuries of struggle and devastation. So I didn't grab any quotes for this, but what happens is around the year 2300, there is a nuclear war that devastates Europe and causes a mass migration and repopulation of places in Europe. So that happens at around 2300. And that's like a major reset. That's sort of like the peak bottom of, the decline that we're talking about, which is beginning now. So again, hopefully we can change this future. But, for now, we might still be on this path unless you join the Legacy Foundation for Human Progress and get in there, and we got to compete against the World Economic Forum's representatives in the government. So.
Amen. Purple Party.
Okay, so this is after the nuclear war. There's a politician / leader that arises called John Tering, and this is interesting because we're going to get into how is the new leadership structure of the new era that Paul, is living in the future. How is that structured? What brought us to that point? What is it going to take us to really truly get there? So let's hear about this character, John Tering.
John Tering and his impact on politics. John Tering was one of the most significant figures in human history, recognized as the first universal leader. His influence was so profound that the modern world still honors him as the most charismatic public figure to ever exist. His role in global politics. Tering played a key role in unifying humanity under a single political and social system, leading to the establishment of the Universal Commonwealth.
This is what we need to do.
This political transformation marked the end of prehistory and the beginning of the Rechtsstaat, a world nation governed by law and order, founded in 2396 AD, year one of their calendar. His leadership was compared...
Yeah, they reset their calendar at 2396, based on the world events and that establishment of the positive new world order. This is not the dystopian version. And again, we're going to talk about what it takes to get there.
Okay.
Compared to figures like Woodrow Wilson, but on a much larger scale. He helped create the necessary trust among different cultures, persuading them to unite under a single, fair, and equal system for all of Earth's inhabitants. How he transformed leadership. Nationalism. Tering was the first to break free from the shackles of local rulers, advocating for a global system rather than fragmented nation-states. He was known for his powerful speeches, inspiring millions and driving the world towards unity. His speech at the Tutti 394 European Convention was particularly historic, paving the way for the official formation of the Universal Commonwealth.
The legacy boy through and through. We only got 300 years to develop this organization to spit out John Turing so he can do the business of uniting the planet.
Oh shit, time's running out. Only
give him a
300
template.
years?
I'll give him a template.
Symbol of the new era,
True
his
that.
image, often depicted with a characteristic gray stole from the Great Year, 2396 AD, became an enduring symbol of the political revolution he led. His legacy in modern society. Even in the distant future,
Right.
Turing is still revered as a living presence in history. Statues and portraits of him are widespread, and his vision of global unity continues to shape the culture and political values of humanity. His impact was so great that the political system he established lasted for centuries, creating a world where law, order, and cooperation replaced war and division. His leadership was the foundation of the El Drere, the 4-century struggle for real globalization, ensuring that conflicts and separatist movements eventually faded away.
All right, so that's that's a little description there of the leader that
The
we
legacy
need.
FHP.
The legacy FHP, yes.
Hey, Taylor, I noticed, I don't know if this is a coincidence, but I noticed you got some azul concentric circles there on his podium there.
Oh right, yeah. I did not prompt
thought
for
it was
that.
your
So funny,
Coincidence?
funny coincidence, I guess. John Turing under the banner of the Michael sun of the concentric circles, representing
this art
the Trinity.
Yeah, I love this art you generated for this. You put some effort into this presentation here.
Yeah, well, technically what I did is I uploaded the book to ChatGPT and asked it to summarize some of these ideas to cover because I
Whoa.
procrastinated on this research, last night and did it all this morning, but somehow we ended up with this fire presentation. So I'm hoping this is a solid. So let's talk about the new era politics. So this is going even
Look at that
further.
picture.
Oh yeah.
The new era politics. So after John Turing, it said that what he established lasted for centuries, so hundreds of years, and so now we're going to get to around 2600 AD, and this is the description of their political system and how it works.
Okay, so this is long after he's been gone.
Yes, yeah, this is close to. I guess that's 200 years because he was at around 2400 was when they reset the year and established the Universal Commonwealth. So 200 years later, this is what they got.
The ruling class
I
in
like
the
that
future
name,
and
Universal
political
Commonwealth.
system. In the future, as described by Paul Amadeus Dienach, political power is no longer in the hands of traditional politicians or nation-states. Instead, governance is led by a class of highly educated intellectuals, natural scientists, and philosophers. Around
Amen.
2600 AD, the political leadership was abandoned, and the world was governed by technocrats and scientists, people akin to the Marie Curies and Max Plancks of the time. This transition marked a departure from traditional politics towards a system rooted in rationality, knowledge, and spiritual development. The final global unification occurred in 2396 AD with the establishment of the Universal Commonwealth. This was the culmination of centuries of political instability, separatist movements, and failed institutions. Before this, humanity had suffered repeated conflicts due to demographic pressures, economic disparities, and wars over resources. Eventually, people realized that global unity was the only path to survival, and that without effective global institutions, destruction was inevitable.
Amen.
Yes, and do remember that the spiritual skeptics always push back on any sort of one world anything because we're always afraid of the dystopian version that does not have spiritual morality at the basis of it.
It's the only thing that would make it work.
Right.
I mean, it's
right.
inevitable. We're going to become. I mean, I always joke about it, and it makes the most sense. But it's like, one way to get over war and one way to get over countries fighting with each other is if everybody becomes America. It's a silly joke, but like that's what it is. In America, the 50 states, we don't fight over each other anymore. we don't go to war with each other. That's what the Uranus book talks about. That we give up.
Oh, D-Bake just froze on us.
Oh no! Usually I'm the one freezing.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. America is an example of like different sort of nation states that were fighting at one point, and they did have to come to an agreement on a unification, and that created like a whole new country that has been considered one of the strongest of the last couple hundred years here. And so can we establish something better on a global scale? And this is saying that it's inevitable. We have to. So,
how politics work in the future. The political system of the future is not a democracy in the traditional sense, but is instead governed by enlightened rulers, known as the electors, who emerge through merit and wisdom rather than elections. Political decision-making is highly rational, ethical, and scientific, and leaders do not seek power for personal gain. The Aderson Institute plays a crucial role in educating these future leaders, ensuring that those who govern are the best suited for the role. The Universal Commonwealth regulates demographics, economy, and social structures. Global leadership is not hereditary or politically motivated, but based on ethical and philosophical qualifications. There is no bureaucracy, and governance is streamlined to ensure efficiency. Is it a technocracy? Yes, the world of the future is a technocracy, in the sense that governance is in the hands of the most knowledgeable and scientifically advanced individuals. However, it is not a purely materialistic or mechanical system. Alongside technological progress, there is a strong emphasis on inner cultivation, ethics, and spiritual wisdom. The Technocrats who took power in 2600 AD were not mere engineers or administrators, but rather deep thinkers with a philosophical understanding of humanity. Despite this,
All right, can you pause right here for 1 second?
Yeah.
You said this came out in the early 1900s. So the way he's using the word technocracy is probably a little bit different than how we're perceiving it today.
Right. And I don't know what the original word was, because again, written in German, it was then translated to Greek and then translated to English. So you do have to wonder, like, how many of these words did he actually know back then? So there might be some kind of like ideas that got put into these words because the context was there in the paragraph.
Yeah, because it sounds like the technocracy that he's talking about is a little bit of a different than the technocracy that we are talking about in 2020 something. This is literally 100 years away from us. It's 100 years ago. So like, and the technocracy he's talking about sounds a lot more spiritual.
Yeah,
he keeps talking about it not being material. And the technocracy we talk about is a little bit different. So I'm just realizing it now, but for the viewers, I guess.
Well, he's talking about this technocracy. I guess you're saying, well, he is talking about how when he's mentioning the spiritual stuff, it's because he's explaining how they do it in the future. But you're right that let's see.
But would you name it a technocracy? Would that be the first word you use to describe your society?
This is AI. This is AI technically. This isn't a direct quote from the book. This is AI saying that technically it's a technocracy because governance is in the hands of the most knowledgeable and scientifically advanced individuals. It's not just a materialistic or mechanical system.
Well, and bear in mind, around that time throughout the 30s, technocracy was vividly inspiring for everyone that got on board. I mean, it became big. A lot of people were really into it, and it was really inspiring. And so, like, no doubt, I think a technocracy could work. Like, I don't want to just shut down technocracy altogether. I think it could absolutely work, but it would have to be a spiritual technocracy. And my greatest skepticism is the rapid execution of a plan like this. Like, the Urantia book emphasizes evolution and going slowly. And Taylor, I actually did share an image in the production room chat of a tweet by Elon Musk where you'll see it if you pull it up here. He actually talks about wanting to build a technocracy.
Accelerating starship development to build the Martian technocracy. D-Bake, what are you saying?
Yeah. why would you even name it technocracy? You know, it's kind of weird.
So he,
that,
he
like,
doesn't
that
he doesn't
implies your
it doesn't use the word
society is, like,
technocracy in the
ran
book.
by technology. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just that's just from the AI summary. Okay, because
Hmm.
it, like, if I'm trying to create some spiritual mind body spirit progress movement on planet Earth, I wouldn't call it a technocracy. That's just a
Yeah.
weird word to pick. I'm wondering if, but you said he doesn't use that word, so it's just the AI saying it.
Yeah, no, this is kind of like it's trying to combine these two ideas where we've basically, I guess the positive part of technocracy is that the only way to manage enough resources, because we have input, as a global population, we're consuming resources, which means we have to produce enough essential goods and services. And if there's an imbalance of that, the quality of life goes down, or, you know, you get like the elite sort of their quality of life is good, but then the majority of the people the quality of life goes really low, because we're not managing resources right. So, I mean, this, you know, in a general sense, he describes that in the new era, they work very hard to balance all these things and understand the philosophy and ethics behind it. And in doing so, they're able to create a balanced worldwide culture. But no, yeah, he doesn't. The technical word technocracy is not what is actually used here. So we'll continue.
Despite this, there was a period known as the Eldre era, 2396-3906, where society became overly focused on technological and economic achievements to the detriment of spiritual and artistic growth. This was later corrected in the Nogere era, starting in 3906 AD, which emphasized a balance between scientific progress and inner development. In the future, humanity is governed by a meritocratic, technocratic, and ethical elite, ensuring global unity, peace, and spiritual advancement. Wars and conflicts are things of the past, and leadership is based on wisdom and intellectual achievement rather than wealth or political maneuvering. It is a technocracy fused with a deep spiritual and philosophical awareness, making it fundamentally different from any political system we know today. John Turing and his impact on.
So there's that. There's the end kind of that paragraph, and yeah, I guess to add a note here is actually that. It didn't just become totally spiritual around the year 2400 with John Turing. He just made the first universal commonwealth, and then there was still the battle between materialism and spiritual, you know, progress, and that was
So once
only
you overcome
fully solved.
nationalism,
And that's what they call the new era, which is closer to the 3906 AD. It's not 3906 AD and on. It's actually like the last couple hundred years of 3906. And we'll get into the spiritual revolution that occurred in order to make that really possible and sort of seal the final deal. Yeah, so that's okay. We covered some politics stuff. Now I think we're going on to the religion in the future, and what happened, how it changed profoundly.
In the future,
it's funny
religion
how they call it
evolves
like
into
the new era and the Eldera.
Yeah.
Like new era, Eldera.
Yeah, the new era, old age and the new age.
In the future, religion evolves into a more profound and undogmatic spirituality. Traditional religious dogma disappears, and instead there is a unification of spiritual knowledge that transcends human limitations. This new belief system is called Volkic knowledge, which replaces old religious doctrines with a higher, more universal understanding of existence without rejecting the moral and emotional values of past religions.
Legatic
Christianity,
knowledge.
for example, is described as having served an important role in human history, providing comfort and moral guidance. However, over time, it became too dogmatic and anthropomorphic, attempting to answer all questions in human terms, thus limiting its divine essence. In the future, the religious feeling is revived, but in a way that is free from dogmatism, holy synods, and holy scriptures. Instead of rigid belief, people develop a form of direct knowledge called the Nibelwirch, which reveals the existence of a great reality, a divine element that exists beyond reason. This experience allows people to see and feel a transcendent truth that had always been present but was previously misunderstood or ignored. The essence of this spirituality is centered around the concept of the Samith, an ultimate reality that is beyond human comprehension. While its true nature remains unknowable, the knowledge of its existence is enough to liberate humanity from doubt and existential suffering. Overall, religion in the future becomes a deeply personal, intuitive, and direct connection to a higher reality, rather than a set of imposed doctrines. It is no longer in conflict with scientific advancements, as both are seen as part of a single, unified truth.
Okay, so some descriptions on religion in the future. I also have some interesting quotes because they actually mention some things about Jesus, specifically in the future. Let's see. Here's an interesting quote. And this is Paul writing in his diary. So now this is direct Paul. He says, "They're all so peaceful that it makes you wonder whether they all go somewhere and pray in groups. Maybe they go to one of their myriads of temples, the temple of the universal spirit, the Socrates, the history temple, Ars Poetica, divine wisdom, mercy, or the temple of the heart of Jesus. This last one, with the twin belfries in the front, strongly reminds me of the towers of our own Grossmünster in Zurich, though these are much taller." He's talking about the temples, but what do you think of the names of those temples? Any ones stick out to you?
Yeah, those are pretty cool.
Yeah, wait, so back up. You said that was from the diary of the Apostle Paul?
No. Paul Dinock. The whole book is his diary.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
so
I
I went to the book here.
I heard Jesus at the end of that.
Mhm.
Say it.
Yeah.
Say it
So here's some of the temples that are listed. The Temple of the Universal Spirit, the Socrates. That's two different temples. Socrates Temple and the Temple of the Universal Spirit. And then, there's a couple other lists. Divine Wisdom is one of them, Mercy, or the Temple of the Heart of Jesus.
Yeah, that one, that last one, obviously.
Right. So, they definitely recognize the magnitude of Jesus and Christianity. But there was a quote here that pointed out that Christianity, for example, is described as serving an important role in human history, providing comfort and moral guidance. However, over time it became too dogmatic and anthropomorphic, attempting to answer all questions in human terms, thus limiting its divine essence. In the future, the religious feeling is revived, but in a way that is free from dogmatism, holy synods, and holy scriptures. And we know about some of those sort of insights and complaints against, or complaints of dogmatized or crystallized Christianity. So it's interesting.
What the Urantia book presents is really a reform of Christianity. Is that Christianity holds within it the latent seeds of the greatest religion of mankind, but it's being held back by the same thing that caused Jesus to have trouble with the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin in the first place. But this does remind me of the quote from the teachings of Jesus when they were going through, I think it might have been Alexandria, and I'm blanking on the name, but there was like a school that had all these religious leaders, and they all came together under the concept
School of Urmia.
Thank you. Yeah, the School of Urmia. They had the shared vision of one God, and they exchanged all their religions in this coexist kind of fashion. And they had true religious growth in the process. That's what that reminded me of when you're listing off all those temples of the future.
Yeah, that's a cool mini series title, Temples of the Future.
Yeah.
Here, let's see. This is kind of a side. Yeah, I won't talk about that now. But let's see here if there's any other. Yeah, so those are just some quotes about the religious stuff, and now I want to do a description of what was the main. So that's a general description of religion, but what was this event that happened that they call the Nebelwerk, or the Great Light? What exactly happened? So they talk about how there was a new spiritual understanding that arrived to mankind in like a profound sort of flash in these moments, and eventually it affected the whole culture. And it wasn't like a physical manifestation per se, but it was like so profound that like a lot of people like were acting differently. So yeah, let's get into the summary.
The arrival of the Nibelwurch before, during, and after. What preceded the Nibelwurch? For centuries before the Nibelwurch, there was a slow but deliberate spiritual and intellectual evolution in humanity. This was largely driven by the Aderson Institute and the establishment of the Valley of the Roses, which became a global center for spiritual and intellectual enlightenment. Key figures predicted a coming transformation. Aloysius Nilsson, circa 8226 AD, spoke of great events dozing in the depths of the future. Philosophers Close and Lelia Napotkin urged people to be prepared for an era of enlightenment. Janssen, a biologist, first detected anatomical changes in the most delicate parts of the brain, linking them to spiritual refinement. As anticipation grew, many intellectuals sensed that a great event was coming. However, nobody could predict the exact arrival of the Nibelwurch, not even the greatest thinkers. The arrival of the Nibelwurch, 3382 AD, 986 of their calendar. The Nibelwurch struck suddenly, with Alexis Volky being the first known individual to experience it. His enlightenment was described as an instant and complete transformation of perception. A new antenna of understanding was added to the human brain, enabling direct, undeniable spiritual knowledge. Following Volky, hundreds and then thousands of others experienced the Nibelwurch, leading to a radical shift in consciousness. People no longer just believed in spiritual truths, they knew. How did society react? The initial reaction was overwhelming. Mass neglect of daily life. People abandoned their jobs and worldly concerns, unable to process the enormity of what had happened. Many were overjoyed, believing they were the luckiest generation in history. Others felt lost as their old motivations and ways of thinking became irrelevant. However, there was also a dark side to the transition. Mass suicides. The overwhelming spiritual enlightenment led to a wave of suicides. Many saw no reason to continue living in the material world after experiencing such profound revelations. Philosophical resistance. Institutions such as Gled, Ossen, and Skulkin resisted the Nibelwurch, arguing that knowledge outside human cognition was dangerous. Some dismissed it as a mass delusion.
It's like all the religious leaders, what they would say when new knowledge arrives, isn't it?
Right. That's actually fascinating.
Sounds
like,
also a lot like the hippie movement too.
Yeah, and like drinking the Kool-Aid and
acid,
people like
LSD.
Charles Manson and all that. Like,
but in this case, they're
It's
not like
natural, it's
taking something.
biologic.
Yeah, it's some natural event that's just happening to groups of people in these sections and is slowly expanding.
It's interesting. It's like the collective consciousness reached a point where it's unavoidable, and people who weren't prepared got an over revelation, just like the Urantia book warns about. The dangers of over revelation, and so we got to stay ready. We're going to be ready for this spiritual revolution when it happens.
Yeah.
So the 5D DNA activation happened on the planet, and we entered the age of Aquarius, but not many people were ready for it.
Yeah, right.
The rapture
but
ensued.
again, we can change this future so that people are ready for it. I mean,
okay.
It's pretty wild. I mean, to suggest the talk about mass suicides, you would think like, oh, spiritual revelations, how could that result in something like mass suicide? Surely it would, and I'm sure the skeptics in this age would use the same argument, like nothing truly good would result in a suicide. But to me, what I see here is that there is such a contrast in the ideas and motivations of the people at the time, and then these new set of motivations and spiritual insights come in that is so much more clearer or different, that some individuals are unable to resolve or bridge the gap, and it results in them maybe sort of being stuck in that sort of airy-fairy spiritualism, to the point where they actually, commit suicide because of these sort of realizations, and then they forget the value of being here incarnated in a body, and actually living this experience. So I don't know, it does point out that there is always a clash of like human psychology and like spiritual revelations, or anything that deals with the direct movement of your perception. Some somewhat external force sort of being available, and now you're perceiving in such a different way. So yeah, it's interesting. I haven't heard of this idea before, but let's continue.
The integration of the Nibelwirch into society. After the initial turmoil, spiritual leaders, including Volke and the Aderson Institute, took action. They preached that this new enlightenment should be used for inner cultivation and harmony, rather than abandoning life. Over the next centuries, Homo sapiens transitioned into Homo occidentalis novus, a being of higher intellect and direct spiritual awareness. By the 11th century of their timeline, around 1050 AD, 3546 AD, the Volkic ideal had triumphed, becoming the dominant spiritual and philosophical paradigm. The legacy of the Nibelwirch. The Nibelwirch was the single greatest evolutionary leap in human history. It ended the era of Homo sapiens and ushered in Homo occidentalis novus. It revealed the true meaning of all past spiritual and intellectual struggles. It provided humanity with a direct experience of higher reality, making old belief systems and philosophies obsolete. Every year, on September 6th, the anniversary of the Nibelwirch, humanity celebrates Gretwirch the day the new era began.
Right. So, and actually, what this just the idea that pops into my head here was six epochal revelation, the direct perception, the opening of a new antenna, something that is no longer a book or a philosophy. Jesus taught in words. Although he did, there was the arrival of the Spirit of Truth, the thing at Pentecost. That was a direct personal experience that his followers were having. That was profound.
You're right.
And so that's an example of something that is like a direct new spiritual connection that opens. Now this is sort of describing another thing like that, but on such a larger scale, and almost to the point where you almost can't deny its presence anymore. Like, I guess with the Spirit of Truth is like, it's still like, if you don't want to tap into it, that's fine. If you do want to tap into it, it's there. But at this point, it's almost like it's here, baby, and it's changing everything. Like you can't avoid perceiving this because the mass consciousness has changed, I guess, or we've hit a threshold point. Maybe you could say that we've entered a new part of the galaxy, and the spiritual consciousness time zone, it has been sort of upgraded. The flip has been switched.
The gravity is different. Yep. The pineal's just fucking pissing out DMT all into your brain.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a fun little description, because we talked about underground cities someone did earlier. I think it was because we were talking about Antarctica, and in the future they do have underground cities, and they're pretty cool.
It's in the Future Society of 3906 AD, as described by Paul Amadeus Denoch. Underground cities exist beneath the already massive and densely populated surface metropolises. These subterranean cities are illuminated with a soothing pale green light, which is designed to create a comfortable and calming atmosphere for their inhabitants. One of the places mentioned is a massive city beneath the surface of Norfor, a metropolis that hosts 28 million people above ground, with 23 million permanent residents. Despite the already staggering population density above, there exists another gigantic, fully illuminated city deep within the earth, full of life. Denoch, initially in disbelief, found it hard to accept such a vast underground civilization. These underground cities were a solution to overpopulation and space constraints, demonstrating the ingenuity of future generations in creating sustainable living environments. In addition to vertical expansion with towering skyscrapers and wide air bridges, the people of this time also developed extensive subterranean networks to accommodate their immense population.
That's wildly imaginative. That's really cool that all this came to this guy while he was knocked out unconscious in this sleep state.
Well, I mean, you guys keep saying came to this guy or like he received this. Is like, no, man, he was there. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
unique. He was there in a body, full daily perception, full reasoning. It's not even an out of body experience. He literally woke up in somebody else's body that had, left that body because it had died. Andreas Northam, near death experience, didn't come back to the body, but the body was flash frozen, which allowed it to still support life, and somehow, a connection was made.
I mean, that makes sense too. Like, if you're running out of space, digging underground is the most reasonable solution. I know in the lore of Star Wars, that is Coruscant is hypothesized to be Earth in the distant future, and they just like kept expanding, and then the lower strata dug deeper underground. And if you want the good real estate, you get up at the top. But I mean, I don't know if it'll be exactly like that, but it really kind of checks out as something reasonable.
Maybe when he was passed out to sleep, he got a glimpse into a possible future timeline.
Yeah, I'm more akin to believe that this is a possible timeline, that we can still sort of change it. Yeah. So, okay, the last couple clips I have here talk about resource management, farming, and the nature versus city kind of aspects. Because we covered kind of the spiritual component that allows this universal society to truly kind of progress. And now here's some kind of like cool technical details on how their society, runs. So some idealistic concepts to try and work towards.
Really cool photo.
And I do want to say a shout out to the chat. If we could keep it clear so we're not blowing it up, that'd be great. Just keep it on topic. Appreciate it. Appreciate everybody that's still with us. I hope you're enjoying the show. Taychill is killing it from the future. Let's get back at it. And don't forget to press that like button. Please help us out. Get to the front page so everybody else can enjoy it too.
All right. Resource management.
Earthly resources and energy production. In the future society of 3906 AD, humanity has mastered and tamed earthly resources to ensure an abundant and sustainable way of life. One of the most astonishing achievements is the large-scale energy production system. For example, Australia has been transformed into a massive generator that provides nearly the entire planet with energy. Energy sources include nuclear, hydroelectric, solar, and wind power, utilized in harmony to support both urban and rural populations. Additionally, climate control technology has allowed formerly inhospitable regions, such as deserts and glaciers, to be converted into fertile, habitable land. The monetary system...
That makes sense. Just turn Australia back into another prison colony. If you're a bad person, you get sent there to work on the energy system for the rest of the world. Do your time.
Yeah. No, there is an interesting bit where it talks about how our laws enforced, and what they actually say is that they don't have or need an actual enforcement team to like arrest people or create prisons, because the universal spiritual morality is so integrated that it's basically not necessary. And so, for example, they talk about how they do have a population management system. And so you can basically apply and I guess to have a kid if you and your partner want to do that, and then you'll be allowed when on a schedule. And that's a controversial idea. However, in terms of simple input, output, and resource management, it does sort of make sense. The problem, though, is really an ethical question of like, how do you make that decision? So I'm not trying to like push that idea that we need to like implement that. It's just an interesting prediction that this says one of the big problems that comes up in the 20th and 21st century, or the next couple hundred years after that, is that because we are not managing our resources correctly and not having any population laws, it creates a sense of survivalism, because population is growing. We're not using energy correctly. There's still selfish motivations. Quality of living is going down. It's creating this big gap, and that creates a lot of turmoil and tension. And so, something they implement in the future apparently is making sure they manage their total resource intake with resource production. So here's the monetary system. Do they got money?
By the 39th century, money as it existed in earlier eras has been abolished.
They got money.
Instead, society operates on a system where goods and services are provided based on need rather than accumulation of wealth. Industrial production ensures that everyone has what they require, and excess accumulation of resources or personal hoarding is seen as unnecessary. Economic and political life is centered around cooperative labor organizations rather than individual wealth accumulation. Work and retirement. People do not work for a lifetime as in earlier centuries. Instead, everyone participates in a 2-year mandatory service between the ages of 17 and 19. After this period, they are free from the necessity of work for the rest of their lives. This service is performed in glothners, which are industrial units responsible for production. The entire society ensures that industrial and manual labor is completed efficiently within this limited service period, allowing people to dedicate the remainder of their lives to intellectual, artistic, and spiritual pursuits.
Dude, that would be a really, really freaking good idea. And then we just make sure they live in luxury, so it's not like a hellhole. So you don't have to, you don't mind your 2-year service. You're eating good every night, nice beds, taking care of them. But you just do your 2 years and get out, and the world keeps going on. That'd be fucking amazing.
This really does.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Taylor.
No,
I was just gonna say this really does parallel the technocratic vision in the 30s of working 4 hours a day, for 4 days a week from the period of 25 to 45, and everything is still covered within those shifts and everything efficiently. And it sounds like that amplified into the remote future where you can further condense that work conscription
only 2 years
period of time. That was always the vision. In the future, you'll have to work less hours because robots will take care of everything and all that. So we're approaching that. And then it's a big question: how are we going to get there?
Dude, it's
what about the bugs? No eating the bugs?
It's hilarious.
I hope not.
It's hilarious because Paul is there, and Stefan was actually Andreas Northam's best friend, and so when Andreas wakes up, but it's actually Paul inside, Stefan knows. He knows that this is not his friend, and so, but what Stefan does is he basically becomes his handler. He tours him around the city. He gets him integrated into daily life. And it's funny because what we get is these conversations back and forth between Stefan and Paul, describing the future society. And Stefan is he talks about how hard he works during his 2-year mandatory service, and Paul's you only had to work for 2 years? What did you do? And Stefan's oh, it was very hard work. It was endless. I made combs in a factory. So I was it's what they see as kind of hard work is it's nothing compared to the grueling societies that we now have. I mean, I'm sure they keep them busy in the glothners, but at the end of the day, they're making combs. They're doing daily production needs of the society, and so 2 years and then you retire. I mean, that's we have a 60-year retirement kind of period, work from 20 to 60, and then ideally you can retire. As our resource management gets better, ideally we can continue to decrease that. And here in the future, they've done that to the point where they can decrease it to 2 years, and you only do it between the ages of 17 and 19. Now, also, I imagine because they have the strict population control, they know what their numbers are going to be, so that they know they can have a certain amount of humans within the age of 17 to 19 in those factories at a time, and that is enough to produce the resources they need for the entire planet. And obviously, I'm sure a lot of this is automated as well, robotics, but there's always, I guess, some amount of human element that is somewhat needed. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not needed. Maybe they do it more as just like a service period to kind of instill within the youth, what it takes to produce resources.
Well, yeah, like you mentioned, he worked within those 2 years at like a manufacturing plant producing combs. So it's probably like you could work at any arbitrary facility, and you're just handling the logistics and the robots, and the maintenance and the upkeep and shipping and all that kind of stuff. So it'd be like working at really any kind of factory or warehouse or production kind of job.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is here's a
Yeah, and
a
the
description. Go
Urantia
ahead.
book. Yeah. I'll probably pull a quote before I say it if you want to talk.
The Urantia book.
Shut up, you're a fucking asshole.
So this is cool. The 2-year service is considered a rite of passage and a duty to society. Young people work in various fields such as administration, industry, healthcare, and agriculture. The work is seen not as a burden but as a means of contributing to the common good. Those completing their service receive admiration and respect from the community. Importantly, no one is forced into service, but societal values and cultural expectations ensure that everyone participates voluntarily. So remember, like I said, there's no police force like making sure that these kids go to the factories every day. There's a culture which sort of inspires people to do this. Because it's service, service to others would be the term, as the law of one would put it. This system ensures society runs efficiently without forcing people into lifelong labor. The focus is on maintaining a balance between personal fulfillment and communal responsibility, fostering a civilization where work is minimal, resources are plentiful, and life is dedicated to higher pursuits. D-Bake, you got your quote?
Ah, crap. I don't think I can find it quickly enough. I think it's on government on a neighboring planet, or it might be when we get into Light and Life. I'm not sure, but it just says that the students in college, they're the ones that are responsible for creating all the manufacturing needs for the planet. I'm pretty sure it's on government of a neighboring planet, if you remember that part, Magma.
Really?
I'm trying to bring it up. I'll find it up, and that further backs this up. Give me a second, I'll find it.
Yeah. I might even be able to use the Urantia bot to kind of find that quick. I'll just play this audio and we'll continue looking for it.
Play it.
In the future,
This is about
farming undergoes a transformation that balances advanced technology with a return to natural methods. Crops no longer depend on seasonal cycles or weather conditions, as climate control technology ensures stable growing environments across all regions. This allows food to be produced year-round, eliminating the risks associated with unpredictable weather. After a period where artificial food and lab-grown substitutes were common, humanity returns to traditional farming, not out of necessity but due to nostalgia and a deeper understanding of nature. However, this return is enhanced by highly advanced technology. Farmers and shepherds use intelligent machines with memory and judgment similar to human minds, making agriculture more efficient while preserving the organic quality of food. Farmland expands into areas once considered unusable, such as deserts and glacial regions, which are now converted into fertile meadows and pastures. Central Asia, which was once barren, is transformed into productive land, using artificial light to support plant growth. This expansion allows agriculture to thrive even in places that were previously inhospitable. Climate control technology plays a key role in maintaining agricultural output, ensuring global food security. Weather no longer affects food production, allowing humanity to grow crops in a controlled and sustainable way. This new approach restores natural landscapes, bringing back grasslands and meadows that had been lost due to past industrial overdevelopment. The rural areas, known as Landsby, become vital centers of agricultural activity, blending human expertise with advanced technology. Farmers are no longer seen as simple laborers, but as highly skilled professionals who manage both the natural world and sophisticated machinery. Their role is crucial in sustaining the planet's food supply, ensuring that production remains efficient, environmentally friendly, and independent of natural disasters. This evolution of farming creates a perfect balance between nature and technology, securing a future where food is abundant, sustainable, and free from the limitations of the past. In the future, cities are designed to...
Let's hit this quote and then just talk about the cities yet.
So I just wanted to back up of what you were talking about, that 17 to 19 conscription to, manufacture for the rest of the planet. It's a great idea, and it's kind of actually hinted at and implied in the Urantia book. So this is from paper 72. It's called Government on a Neighboring Planet. So this is supposed to be a paper that is a revelation on how a neighboring planet governs their planet. And it's kind of cool that you're talking about this too. So I feel like this kind of lines up. So let's see what it's saying. This is from part 4, the educational system, 7241. The educational system of this nation is compulsory and co-educational in the pre-college schools that the student attends from ages 5 to 18. Oh, wow. Yeah, from 5 to 18. These schools are vastly different from those of Urantia. There are no classrooms, only one study is pursued at a time, and after the first 3 years, all pupils become assistant teachers, instructing those below them. Books are used only to secure information that will assist in solving the problems arising in the school shops and on the school farms. Much of the furniture used on the continent and the many mechanical contrivances, this is the great age of invention and mechanization, are produced in these shops. You hear that? Right there. Adjacent to each shop is a working library where the student may consult the necessary reference books. Agriculture and horticulture are also taught throughout the entire educational period on the extensive farms adjoining every local school. That's wild. So from ages 4 to 18, if you're in those schools, you're making most of the furniture and mechanical devices that is used on that planet. That's a great system. It makes sense. And then I like also how they put that, like, there's a library that gets accumulated through all the people that go through that school, and that library is directly across from the actual shop. So if anybody in that shop needs to consult the library in order to figure out the problems, it's right there. And that kind of solves that monetary problem, that profit motive problem, like everything that everybody needs gets generated from the schools when you're learning. And then once you're done learning and you're out of school, you get released from that and you can now pursue your artistic and social endeavors. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got to jump in and say that's such a brilliant idea that they lay out in that book, because I feel like our current school system has taken out a lot of those classes. Like I never got to take a woodworking class or anything like that when I was in school. And I feel like moving into the future, the maker movement will be a great solution for that, getting kids involved in engineering and crafts and working with your hands. Blue collar jobs shouldn't be looked down on, like the trades. Mike Rowe proposes renaming trade work to artisanal work because there's such value in being able to craft things with your hands, do metalworking, glass blowing, and all that. As we move into the future, I mean, yeah, getting kids and high schoolers and young adults to actually be more productive and creative, and it gives their life a sense of purpose. That could seriously move us in the right direction.
Yeah, maybe we should cover this in one of the next Forbidden Scrolls, government on a neighboring planet, I think people would be interested in that. Who isn't interested in ET governments?
Yes, sir. So yeah, interesting overlaps there. And I'm just about done here with this segment. What we have here is a description of nature, city. How do they balance those two? Do they have eco cities or eco village things? So
in the future, cities are designed to incorporate nature in a way that balances high-density urban living with green spaces and environmental harmony. Instead of endless urban sprawl, cities are built upwards, using vertical layers and air bridges to maximize space while preserving natural landscapes. Despite vast open countryside, people prefer to live in well-organized, high-density urban environments rather than spreading out. They build towering megacities with massive air bridges called kroom that stretch across skyscrapers. These cities have multi-level infrastructure, including underground areas allowing efficient use of space while leaving large parts of nature untouched. However, cities are not purely artificial. There are also immense garden cities with green spaces, tree-lined boulevards, and even entire regions dedicated to environmental preservation. Rural areas, called landsby, thrive with advanced yet traditional agricultural practices, sustaining meadows, grasslands, and livestock. These rural regions are interconnected with the cities, forming a balanced system where both technology and nature coexist. Even in the most advanced urban centers, underground and aerial settlements exist alongside vast parks, natural reserves, and carefully maintained landscapes. Climate control and advanced infrastructure allow for sustainable integration of green spaces, ensuring that cities remain livable, beautiful, and environmentally friendly.
All right, that is it. That is, and guys, the book is way more detailed. Again, this is sort of an AI summary of how they've incorporated some of these ideas. I highly recommend it. I think the link is actually in the description.
Yeah,
let
it's
me
in
double
there.
check.
I just edited it, so it
Okay, got it. Yeah, so I think we dropped that link to the book in the description, so definitely check it out. Possibly the best insights on future society that man has ever experienced. So,
yeah, we definitely should read some more for the channel. That sounds really interesting. It's very compelling. The Urantia book says that, like, on the government on the neighboring planet, same paper, that for some reason it is illegal for families to live in structures that are stacked on top of each other, such as apartment complexes. In order to live in a building like that, you need to be single, or maybe not have kids, one of the two. But it just says, like, for some reason, if you're a family, you have to have, like, your own separate thing. I wonder why that's the case. It doesn't really explain why, but we'll read that chapter specifically for another Forbidden Scrolls for all the people out there, because I know you want to know what it's like to live on another planet. I mean, shit, so do I. So check that out, coming at you soon. Tay Chill just killed it with Chronicles from the Future. Fire-ass book. Like he said, link is in the description. I came at you with that Nazi secret breakaway civilization, WEF, running the entire world. That was my angle. And Magma brought it all together with the Technocracy. They want to harvest your loosh. No, they just want to control everything with a social credit system, track your every move. Every time you piss, shit, blink, think a thought, every search that you make in Google will be used against you, and it might prevent you from moving forward in society. You know, that type of thinking. And that it could have all been started from the underground Nazi Antarctic breakaway civilizations. But Tay Chilla has good news from the future that the Universal Commonwealth will be created by John Terring. John Terring, and we will overcome it. But even when we do unify, once we figure out the border conflicts, there is still going to be more problems. Materialism versus spirituality. So let's start addressing them now. That's why the Legacy FHP actually came into existence in the first place, to address these problems. And I'm glad that you guys can be part of the conversation. So leave a comment. Everybody who's been in the chat all day, thank you. I appreciate you guys being tuned in. Make sure you do hit that like button, get us to the front page so we can tell everybody else the good news. Hit that subscribe. That's subscribe in English, so that you are up to date with all the celestial information. And go pick yourself up a shirt if you really want to rep the team. If you're down with creating New Earth, the New Earth Collective, if you want the mind, body, spirit kingdom to externalize in your lifetime, and if you want to help participate in the externalization of the kingdom of heaven, the reintegration with the Galactic Federation, then you should buy a shirt. Buy that shirt. It's only $30, man, and it looks fresh. We got a bunch of different designs. We make a $9 profit, and all that profit goes to helping other people all around the world hit their potential mentally, physically, and spiritually. That is why we're here, to help you become the best that you can be. You are more than what you think you are. You're a celestial being. Hit that subscribe button. I love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. You got anything to say to the people?
I don't think. Is Tyler chiming in there? It's a little hard to hear you.
I think you're tuning in from Saturn.
On the road at the moment, but I just have to say,
mid-podcast, gone on the road.
Yeah, I kind of had to, but we can literally do a standalone episode on every single topic we covered today. So please leave a comment on any subjects that you found interesting. We can do some further research.
If you didn't hear him, he said leave a comment on anything we're talking about, and we'll do further research. And this intro music is just about to end, so I'm going to time it right and stop the stream here soon. I got nothing else for you other than buy the book, Chronicles from the Future, baby. Get stoked on how we create the optimal future. Participate, join the legacy. Thanks for